Looking back, it's easy to see where I went wrong. Not just the big mistake, the one that almost cost me everything, but the little ones. The choices I made, the shortcuts I took, the way I waved off that nagging feeling in my gut. I was young, 23, and brimming with the kind of confidence only someone who hasn't truly messed up can possess. My name is Alex, and I used to think I knew a thing or two about the desert. That year, I was living in a small town on the edge of the Sonoran, working seasonal jobs, mostly surveying land for prospective solar farms or sometimes guiding amateur photographers looking for the perfect saguaro shot. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me outdoors, which was all I really cared about. I'd grown up around this kind of landscape, knew its deceptive beauty, its sudden dangers, or so I thought. Most of my friends were either away at college or stuck in city jobs, so when I had a few days off between gigs, I often went exploring alone. I liked the solitude, the way the vastness of the desert seemed to quiet the static in my head. My truck, a beat-up but reliable F-150, was practically an extension of myself. It had seen more unpaved roads than paved ones. My usual routine involved plotting a course off the beaten path, driving until the dirt tracks faded into rock and scrub, then hiking for a few hours just seeing what was out there. Sometimes I'd find ancient petroglyphs, other times just a particularly resilient desert lily. It was never about a destination, always the journey. This particular trip, the one that still haunts my dreams, started innocently enough. I'd heard whispers from an old prospector about an abandoned mine shaft way out in the Devil's Backbone Range, a notoriously rugged area not far from the Arizona-Mexico border. He claimed it was filled with old mining equipment, maybe even some forgotten ore. Most likely it was just a hole in the ground, but the idea of discovering something untouched, a relic from a bygone era, appealed to my adventurous spirit. I told my buddy Mark I was heading out just a quick overnight trip. Back by Sunday evening latest, I'd promised, tossing my pack into the bed of the truck. Mark just nodded, probably already forgetting. I didn't give him coordinates, just a general direction. That was my first mistake, fueled by a mixture of overconfidence and a desire to be the sole discoverer of whatever lay out there. Who needed to be tracked? I knew what I was doing. I packed light, water, a few protein bars, a solar charger for my phone, though I knew service would be spotty, a first aid kit, a small shovel, and my trusty hunting knife. I also brought a worn map, not for navigation so much as for tracing my finger over the unmarked areas, dreaming up stories. The sun was just starting its slow descent when I turned off the main highway, the paved road quickly giving way to a washboard dirt track. Dust plumed behind me, turning the setting sun into a fiery, blurred disk in my rearview mirror. The landscape was magnificent, painted in shades of orange, purple, and deep red. Saguaros stood like sentinels, their arms raised in silent salute. Cholla cacti shimmered, their spines catching the last rays of light. The air, still warm, had a crisp, dry smell that always calmed me. I drove for what felt like hours, the track growing rougher and narrower until it was barely distinguishable from the surrounding terrain. I finally decided to park in a small, relatively flat clearing surrounded by low mesquite bushes and a few larger boulders. It was still a good few miles from where I estimated the mine shaft might be, but the light was fading fast, and hiking in the dark was just asking for trouble. I cut the engine. The sudden silence was profound, almost deafening after the roar of the truck. I stretched, pulling my backpack from the bed, and walked a few yards from the truck, just taking it all in. The stars were already starting to prickle through the darkening sky, promising a spectacular display. I felt a familiar peace settle over me, that unique blend of awe and isolation that the desert always offered. I was pulling out my small stove to heat some water for instant coffee when I saw it. Just a glimpse at first, through a gap in the mesquite about 50 yards away. It wasn't a rock formation or a particularly gnarled tree or some abandoned piece of equipment I might have expected to find out here. It was a door, standing alone, in the middle of nowhere. It was made of dark, heavy wood, weathered and scarred, but undeniably a door. It had a simple iron handle and what looked like a faded, peeling coat of green paint beneath the grime. But the most unsettling thing wasn't just its presence, but its utter lack of context. There was no frame, no wall, no building around it. It just stood there perfectly upright in the empty desert, like someone had plucked it from an old house and dropped it randomly, miles from the nearest sign of civilization. My breath hitched. The air, which had moments before felt familiar and calming, suddenly felt colder, sharper. A shiver traced its way down my spine, a feeling that had nothing to do with the desert night chill. It was the first, faint tremor of something deeply, fundamentally wrong. My peace was shattered, replaced by a prickling unease. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden oppressive silence. The desert, which had always been a source of comfort, now felt like a vast, watchful eye. Every shadow seemed deeper, every rustle of the sparse brush sounded like a whisper. My initial thought, a desperate attempt to rationalize the impossible, was that it was some kind of art installation. A bizarre, modern sculpture left out here by a reclusive artist. But even as the thought formed, it felt flimsy, easily dismissed by the sheer wrongness of it. There was nothing artistic about this. It was just there, a door. I stood frozen for a long moment, the instant coffee forgot, the small stove still unlit in my hand. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows, making the desert floor look like a series of gaping mouths. I slowly lowered the stove, placing it carefully on the ground, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile illusion of reality I clung to. Curiosity, a powerful and often dangerous instinct in the desert, began to chip away at my fear. It was a compulsion, a primal urge to understand, to solve the puzzle that had so abruptly appeared. I told myself it was just a door, a piece of wood and iron. What harm could it do? With a deep breath that did little to calm my racing pulse, I started walking towards it. Each step felt heavy, deliberate, as if I were wading through thick sand. The mesquite bushes, which had partially obscured it, thinned out, revealing the door in its full, unsettling glory. It truly stood alone, rooted somehow in the hard-packed earth. No frame, no jamb, no hinges connected to anything. It was like a cutout, a perfect rectangle of impossibility. Up close, the details became sharper, more perplexing. The wood was oak or something equally dense and dark, deeply scored by age and weather. The green paint was indeed peeling, revealing a darker, almost black surface beneath like ancient bark. There were no visible nails or screws holding it upright. It simply rose from the ground as if it had grown there. The iron handle was thick, pitted, and cold to the touch, even in the lingering warmth of the evening. It wasn't a handle you'd find on a typical house door. It was more like something from an old cellar, heavy and utilitarian. I circled it slowly, my eyes scanning the ground around it, looking for any sign, any clue. There was nothing. No disturbed earth, no footprints other than my own. The desert floor was undisturbed, a fine layer of dust and pebbles, as if the door had always been there or had simply materialized out of thin air. It was a perfect anomaly, a glitch in the fabric of the familiar world. My rational mind screamed at me to turn back, to get in my truck and drive away as fast as possible, to forget I'd ever seen it. But the other part of me, the adventurous, problem-solving part, was too strong. I had to know. I reached out, my fingers trembling slightly, and touched the wood. It was rough, dry, and surprisingly solid. My hand lingered on the cool, textured surface, tracing the lines of age. It felt real, undeniably tangible, yet utterly out of place. I gripped the iron handle, testing its stability. It was firm, unyielding. My fingers wrapped around the cold metal, and I hesitated, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. This was it, the point of no return. With another shaky breath, I twisted the handle. It turned with a heavy, grinding click that echoed unnaturally loud in the silent desert. It wasn't a light, easy movement, but a mechanical, deep-seated sound, as if ancient gears were reluctantly engaging. My heart leaped into my throat. The handle was fully turned. I pulled. The door didn't swing open easily. It felt heavy, as if resisting my efforts. I had to brace my feet, lean my weight into it, and pull with all my strength. There was a low, groaning sound, like something old and burdened shifting, and then with a final, protesting creak, the door moved inwards. A wave of air, shockingly cold and smelling faintly of damp earth and something metallic, washed over me. It was not the dry, warm desert air. It was the air of a tomb, ancient and sealed. Beyond the threshold, there was only darkness, a profound, absolute darkness that seemed to swallow the last vestiges of twilight. It wasn't just the absence of light, it was a hungry, palpable void. My headlamp was still in my pack near the truck. I cursed my unpreparedness. My instinct was to recoil, to slam the door shut and run. But the sudden blast of cold air, the metallic tang, and the sheer emptiness beyond the opening held me transfixed. It wasn't a room, or a tunnel, or a mine shaft, or any space I could immediately comprehend. It was a wall of black. I stepped back, my eyes wide, trying to pierce the gloom. Nothing. Not a hint of light, not an outline, not even the faint reflection of the desert sky that should have been visible beyond an open doorway. It was a portal to pure blackness. The cold air continued to flow out, persistent and unnerving. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, caught between terror and a desperate need to understand. The desert night was truly falling now, the stars beginning to blaze with a fierce intensity. The door, standing ajar, seemed to mock their light, absorbing it into its profound shadow. Finally, I forced myself to move. I retreated to my truck, my eyes fixed on the gap in the door, half expecting something to emerge from the blackness. I grabbed my headlamp, a powerful LED model, and strapped it to my forehead. I also grabbed my hunting knife, not because I thought it would protect me from whatever lay beyond that threshold, but because it was a tangible anchor, a familiar weight in a world that had suddenly gone sideways. My hands shook as I clicked on the headlamp. The beam, a bright white spear, cut through the rapidly deepening twilight. I walked back towards the door, the light bouncing nervously ahead of me. The beam hit the opening, penetrating the darkness beyond. What it revealed was not a passage or a cave or even a simple room. It was a space, yes, but unlike any I had ever seen. The headlamp beam seemed to dissipate within it, swallowed, unable to illuminate anything beyond a few feet from the threshold. It was a void of immense scale, or perhaps an illusion of scale. The walls, if they were walls, were not rock or earth, but something smooth, dark, and utterly featureless, reflecting no light. They curved away into the impenetrable gloom, giving the impression of an impossibly vast, empty chamber. The ground immediately inside the door was flat, composed of the same dark, smooth material as the walls. It looked like polished obsidian, but absorbed light rather than reflecting it. There was a faint hum, barely perceptible, a low thrumming vibration that I felt more than heard, resonating through the ground and up into my feet. It was a sound that felt ancient, mechanical, and alive all at once. And then I saw it, just a few feet inside the doorway, barely within the reach of my headlamp's focused beam. A symbol etched into the dark floor, glowing faintly with its own internal, sickly green light. It wasn't a symbol I recognized from any ancient culture or modern script. It It was geometric, a series of interlocking triangles and circles, complex and alien, radiating a cold, unsettling luminescence. It pulsed slowly, like a dying heartbeat. A profound chill settled in my bones, far beyond the physical cold emanating from the door. This wasn't natural. This wasn't human. This wasn't from here. My mind raced, trying to reconcile this impossible reality with everything I knew. An abandoned mine shaft, forgotten ore, this was something else entirely. Something beyond my understanding. A primal part of my brain screamed danger, urging flight. But another part, the one that had always sought out the unknown, was utterly captivated. I took another tentative step across the threshold, my boots scraping softly on the dark, smooth floor. The hum intensified slightly, a subtle shift in its frequency, as if my presence had been registered. The air was even colder here, and the metallic smell was stronger, tinged with something else now, a faint, acrid scent like ozone after a lightning strike. I shone my light around, trying desperately to find any other details. The beam, even at its brightest, still struggled. It was like trying to light a cavern with a match. The blackness was too deep, too hungry. I couldn't see a ceiling or far walls or even a clear definition of the space. It simply dissolved into the void. The glowing symbol at my feet drew my gaze again. It seemed to pulse more strongly now, the green light throbbing with a hypnotic rhythm. I knelt, my hands hovering just above the symbol, not daring to touch it. The light seemed to emanate from within the material of the floor itself, not just a surface glow. It was intricate, perfectly formed, clearly the product of immense precision. Far beyond anything an ancient civilization or even modern human technology could easily achieve in such a remote place. As I stared, the edges of the interlocking shapes seemed to subtly shift, a microscopic, fluid movement that made my eyes ache. It was unsettling, like watching something breathe that shouldn't have lungs. I felt a strange pull, a gentle, insistent pressure in my mind, urging me closer, urging me to understand. It wasn't a voice, but an impulse, a deep-seated curiosity that felt like it was being amplified from outside myself. I knew with absolute certainty that this was the kind of place people disappeared into, the kind of mystery that consumed you. But I was 23, full of an unearned confidence, and standing on the precipice of something truly extraordinary. My rational brain was being shouted down by the thrilling, terrifying siren song of the unknown. I stood up, pulling myself away from the symbol's strange allure, and took a few more steps forward, deeper into the darkness. The door remained ajar behind me, a rectangle of fading desert twilight, my last connection to the familiar world. The hum grew steadily louder, a deep, resonant chord that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. The cold intensified, and I could see my breath misting in the air, a stark contrast to the desert night outside. My headlamp beam, struggling against the pervasive gloom, finally caught something else. Not a wall, but a structure. About 15 feet ahead of me, rising from the floor of the void, was a single, tall pillar. It was made of the same dark, light-absorbing material as the floor and walls, but its surface was etched with more of the glowing green symbols, trailing up its height like luminous veins. It seemed to pulse in sync with the symbol on the floor, a slow, rhythmic throb of light. I walked towards it, my boots making no sound on the strange floor. The closer I got, the more complex the etchings on the pillar became. They were not just decorative, they looked like some intricate form of language or perhaps circuitry, flowing with the sickly green light. The pillar was cylindrical, perfectly smooth, about 5 feet in diameter, and it extended upwards into the absolute darkness, its top lost to my vision. It felt immensely old, yet impossibly clean, untouched by dust or decay. As I reached the pillar, the humming intensified to a low roar, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through my chest. The cold air swirled around me, creating small eddies of mist. I reached out a hand, hesitating, then touched the pillar. It was cold, glassy smooth, and completely inert, yet humming with unseen energy. The etched symbols under my fingertips felt like shallow depressions, filled with the glowing green. My hand traced a segment of one of the symbols, an intricate knot of lines and curves. As my finger moved, I felt a subtle electric tingle, not painful but distinct. And then something happened. The symbol directly beneath my finger flared brighter, pulsing with a sudden burst of intense green light. The hum surrounding me also intensified, rising in pitch slightly. Then the pillar itself seemed to come alive. The glowing green lines on its surface began to flow like liquid light, moving up and down its length, accelerating and then slowing, tracing patterns I couldn't comprehend. It was as if I had activated something. A deep thrumming sound, far more powerful than the previous hum, resonated from within the pillar, shaking the floor beneath my feet. It felt like the core of some immense machine had just woken up. My heart was pounding, a frantic drumbeat against the roaring in my ears. This was incredible, terrifying, magnificent. Suddenly, from the darkness above and around me, more green lights flickered on. Not as bright as the pillar, but dim, ethereal glows that slowly began to reveal glimpses of the true scale of the chamber. They were spread out in a vast, geometric grid, receding into the impossible distance. They illuminated faint outlines of more pillars, similar to the one I stood beside, and what looked like massive, arching structures that soared into the blackness. This wasn't a cave, it wasn't a mine. It was an enormous, subterranean complex, hidden beneath the desert, built by something utterly alien. The air grew colder still, the metallic tang sharpening, and the acrid smell of ozone became more pronounced. Panic, cold and sharp, finally began to override my awe. This was too much, too vast, too unknown. I was in something far beyond my depth. My small headlamp was useless here, swallowed by the sheer immensity of the space. I was a tiny speck of light in an ocean of darkness and alien technology. I instinctively recoiled from the pillar, pulling my hand away. The flow of light on its surface seemed to slow, the intense thrumming beginning to recede, as if my touch had only briefly awakened it. The distant lights, however, remained, revealing more and more of the incomprehensible structure. I looked back towards the door, my only escape. It was still there, a rectangular beacon of pale twilight, now appearing impossibly distant. The cold air continued to pour from the opening, but inside the air was stiller, heavier, filled with the hum and the metallic scent. My mind, still struggling to process the impossible scale and nature of my surroundings, conjured images of science fiction movies, of ancient alien artifacts, of forgotten civilizations. But this was real. The cold in my lungs was real. The hum in my bones was real. The glowing symbols pulsating with an alien life were real. As I stared at the door, contemplating a hasty retreat, I noticed something new, something that sent another jolt of icy fear through me. The light from the door, the faint glow of the desert twilight, was no longer steady. It was flickering, not like a failing bulb, but like a distant strobe light rapidly winking in and out of existence. And the doorway itself seemed to be shimmering. The edges of the wooden door, the frame of nothingness, were wavering, distorting. My blood ran cold, the door was closing, or perhaps the connection to my world was failing. I spun around, looking back at the vast, green-lit chamber. My fear intensified. Was this place collapsing? Was I about to be trapped? The hum from the pillar, though reduced, still resonated, and the distant green grid continued to glow, outlining the impossible architecture. I had to get out now. All curiosity vanished, replaced by a desperate, instinctual need to escape. I turned and began to run towards the flickering doorway. My boots pounded on the smooth, dark floor, making no sound. The air grew colder, the sense of urgency sharpening into pure terror. The distance to the door seemed to stretch, the rectangle of familiar light receding even as I ran towards it. The shimmering grew more pronounced, the flicker faster. It was like watching a television screen dying pixel by pixel, but on a cosmic scale. The edges of the door itself seemed to blur, distort, and then slowly begin to shrink. It wasn't closing in the traditional sense, but contracting, as if the portal itself was constricting, losing its connection to the outside world. "No!" I shouted, the sound swallowed by the vastness and the hum. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning, the cold air searing them with every desperate gasp. The glowing symbol on the floor, the one I had first seen, flashed brighter as I ran past it, almost as if registering my panicked flight. The doorway was now barely half its original size, a vertical slit of rapidly diminishing light. The familiar desert colors outside were already fading, becoming an indistinct blur. I could feel the strange, pulling sensation in the air, as if the very space around me was being stretched and compressed. I launched myself forward in a final, desperate surge, my hands outstretched. My fingers brushed against the shimmering, distorting edges of the door just as it contracted to a point, and then, with a silent pop, it vanished. Utter darkness, the green lights of the alien complex were gone. The hum was gone. The metallic smell, the cold, all vanished in an instant. It was as if the entire structure, the pillars, the grid, the immense void had blinked out of existence. I tumbled forward, expecting to hit the smooth, dark floor, but instead I fell onto something soft, gritty, and undeniably familiar. I lay there for a moment, disoriented, my heart still racing, my breath ragged. Slowly, carefully, I pushed myself up. My headlamp was still on, its beam cutting through the gloom. It wasn't the deep, consuming darkness of the alien complex. It was the familiar, starlit darkness of the desert night. The faint, earthy smell of the Sonoran filled my nostrils. I looked around, my headlamp beam sweeping in a frantic arc. I was outside, right where I had been. My truck was there, 50 yards away, a solid, reassuring silhouette against the brilliant canopy of stars. The mesquite bushes were there. The ground, now illuminated by my headlamp, was the same sandy, rocky desert floor I had parked on. But the door was gone. There was no trace of it, no standing oak door, no open portal to an alien complex. Not even a disturbed patch of earth where it had been, just empty desert, exactly as it had appeared before I had first glimpsed it. I stood there, trembling, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had I imagined it? Had the extreme solitude and stress of the desert played tricks on my mind? Was I hallucinating? But the cold, the metallic smell, the vibrating hum, the immense glowing structure, it had felt too real, too vivid to be a dream or an illusion. My hands were still tingling from touching the pillar. The acrid scent of ozone lingered faintly in my nostrils. I walked slowly to the spot where the door had stood. My headlamp beam swept over the ground. Nothing, just an undisturbed patch of desert, indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape. The small stones, the dry weeds, the fine layer of dust, all exactly as they should be. It was as if the door and everything behind it had never existed. But I knew it had. The memory was too sharp, too visceral. The fear, the awe, the desperation, they were still churning in my gut. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space, my mind struggling to bridge the gap between impossible experience and undeniable reality. The desert night was silent again, utterly still, as if holding its breath. The stars blazed with indifference. Eventually, the initial shock began to wear off, replaced by a cold, persistent dread. What had I stumbled upon? Where had I been? And why was it gone now? I felt a profound sense of isolation, unlike anything I had ever experienced in the desert before. Before, it had been a comforting solitude. Now, it was a terrifying emptiness. I was alone with something I couldn't explain, something that defied every law of nature I knew. I retreated to my truck, my movements stiff and uncertain. My planned overnight trip, my search for an old mine shaft, felt ridiculously trivial, belonging to a lifetime ago. I didn't want instant coffee. I didn't want to camp out under the stars. All I wanted was to be anywhere but here. I got into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut with more force than necessary. The familiar scent of old upholstery and dust was a small comfort. I fumbled for my phone, needing to connect to hear a human voice, but I already knew, no service, not out here. I put my hands on the steering wheel, gripping it tightly, my knuckles white. My eyes darted to the spot where the door had been, half expecting it to reappear, to shimmer back into existence. But the desert remained empty, silent, vast. My logical mind, reeling from the impossibility of it all, tried to grasp at straws. A mirage, a vivid dream induced by dehydration or exhaustion, but I felt perfectly alert, hyper-aware even. My senses were screaming at me that it had been real. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, a sudden, reassuring burst of mechanical sound that chased away some of the silence. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the desert ahead. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to leave. I had to put as much distance as possible between myself and that empty patch of ground. I shifted into drive, and the F-150 lurched forward, kicking up a plume of dust. I drove blindly, following the faint tracks that had led me here, my eyes scanning the rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see the shimmering door materialize behind me. The desert seemed to stretch endlessly, the saguaros like silent witnesses, their shadowed forms indifferent to my terror. As I drove, the memory of the alien complex replayed in my mind. The vastness, the glowing symbols, the impossibly smooth material, the low, resonant hum. It wasn't just a place, it was a phenomenon, a gateway. A secret, ancient mechanism hidden beneath the very land I thought I knew so well. And I had been inside it, I had touched it, I had nearly been trapped in it. The thought sent another wave of nausea through me. What if it wasn't gone forever? What if it could reappear? What if it hadn't closed, but had simply disconnected like a faulty circuit, waiting to power back on? The drive was agonizing. Every shadow seemed to conceal something. Every distant rock formation took on sinister shapes. The moon began to rise, casting an eerie, silver light over the landscape, turning familiar shapes into spectral figures. I pushed the truck as fast as I dared on the rough track, the tires kicking up stones and dust. I didn't care about the mine shaft anymore. I didn't care about discovery. All I wanted was the safety of civilization, the comforting, mundane reality of paved roads and streetlights. It felt like hours, a never-ending blur of dust and darkness, before I finally saw the distant glow on the horizon, the faint light pollution of the nearest small town. A wave of relief, so potent it almost brought me to tears, washed over me. I was getting out. I was escaping. But even as the town lights grew closer, a cold certainty settled in my heart. I hadn't truly escaped. The desert had shown me something impossible, something that would forever alter my perception of reality. The world was bigger, stranger, and far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. The confidence I had carried with me, the belief that I knew this landscape, was shattered. I reached the main highway, the smooth asphalt a welcome relief after the endless dirt track. I pulled over, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel. I leaned my head against it, taking deep, shuddering breaths. The air conditioning, finally blasting cold air, felt like a luxury I hadn't known existed. My phone finally picked up a signal. I stared at the screen, seeing Mark's name, wondering what I would tell him, or if I could tell him anything at all. How do you explain a vanishing alien door in the middle of the desert? He'd think I was crazy, that I'd had too much sun. I checked the time. It was well past midnight. I had been inside that place for maybe 15-20 minutes at most, but it felt like an eternity. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling, the hum of the truck a stark contrast to the alien thrum I had just experienced. The small town glowed faintly in the distance, a beacon of normalcy. I knew I needed to go there to get gas, to maybe grab some food, to just exist in a place where impossibilities didn't spontaneously appear and disappear. But I also knew that I couldn't just go back to my life, not after this. This experience had marked me. It had changed something fundamental within me. The desert had always been a place of beauty and solitude. Now it was a place of profound, terrifying secrets, and I had glimpsed one of them. My mind, though still reeling, was already starting to process the implications. If such a thing existed, hidden beneath the earth, what else was out there? What was its purpose? Who built it? And why here in this remote, forgotten corner of the Sonoran? I started driving again, slowly, towards the town. The initial panic was subsiding, replaced by a heavy sense of disorientation and a strange, almost morbid fascination. My confidence was gone, replaced by a cautious, almost reverent fear. I was no longer Alex, the desert guide who knew a thing or two about the Sonoran. I was Alex, the man who had stepped through a door to nowhere into a place that shouldn't exist. As I drove, my thoughts kept returning to the glowing green symbols, the silent hum, the impossible architecture stretching into the void. It was an enigma, an affront to everything I understood about the world. And a part of me, despite the terror, felt an undeniable pull back towards it, a dangerous, foolish part. I reached the first gas station in town. The fluorescent lights felt harsh, almost painful, after the absolute darkness I had just endured. I parked at a pump, but I couldn't bring myself to get out immediately. I just sat there, watching the mundane activity of people filling their tanks, grabbing snacks, going about their ordinary lives. They had no idea. They couldn't possibly imagine what lay hidden out there, just miles from their complacent existence. I eventually got out, moving stiffly. The air felt too warm, too thick, too normal. I filled the tank, my eyes constantly scanning the horizon, the dark, distant mountains where the Devil's Backbone Range lay, the place where the door had been. After paying, I went inside the small convenience store. The cashier, a tired-looking older woman, barely glanced at me. I grabbed a coffee, a large one, and a couple of those sugary pastries I usually avoided. I needed something familiar, something comforting. As I walked out, sipping the too hot coffee, I felt a vibration in my pocket. My phone, it was Mark. I hesitated. What was I going to say? Hey Mark, remember that mine shaft? Well, I found a door to an alien complex instead, and then it disappeared. No, that wouldn't fly. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my still shaking hands. I had to tell him something. I couldn't just disappear. But as I looked at the phone, a new, chilling thought struck me. The door had appeared and disappeared. What if it wasn't just a random occurrence? What if it had a pattern? What if it reappeared when I wasn't looking? What if it led to other places or other times? The implications were staggering, terrifying, and utterly captivating. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep tonight. My mind was reeling, buzzing with 1,000 questions, 1,000 impossible scenarios. The desert had given me more than a pretty saguaro shot or an old mine shaft. It had given me a glimpse into an unknown reality, a secret world hidden in plain sight. And I had a terrifying feeling that, despite my escape, this was only the beginning. My journey to find an abandoned mine had ended, but a much more dangerous, incomprehensible journey had just begun. The desert, my beloved desert, now held a terrifying new meaning. It was not just sand and rock, sun and scrub. It was a veil, a thin membrane separating our world from something else entirely, and I had just peeled it back. I stared at Mark's name on my phone, the backlight illuminating my trembling thumb hovering over the call button. The mundane act of making a phone call felt like an insurmountable hurdle. How do you package an experience like that into words for someone who lives in a world where doors don't spontaneously appear and vanish, leading to alien caverns under the desert? He'd laugh, then worry, then probably tell me I needed a long break and some sleep. And he wouldn't be wrong about the sleep, but it wouldn't be the kind of sleep that fixed this. I put the phone back in my pocket. Not yet. I needed to sort this out in my head first, or at least try. I pulled out of the gas station, the familiar rumble of the F-150's engine a small comfort against the chaos in my mind. The street lights of the small town felt like a protective embrace, a fragile barrier against the vast, dark emptiness I had just fled. I found a cheap motel on the edge of town, one of those places with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. Any port in a storm. The idea of sleeping in my truck, even far from the site, was unbearable. I needed walls, a locked door, something solid between me and the incomprehensible. The room was stale, smelling faintly of old cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. I didn't care. I dropped my pack on the floor, kicked off my boots, and sat heavily on the worn bedspread. My mind was still racing, replaying the moments in the alien chamber. The cold air, the hum, the impossible symbols, the vast, shadowy structures receding into darkness. The terror was still fresh, but a strange, potent curiosity was already beginning to weave its way through it. I knew I wouldn't sleep. My body was exhausted, but my brain was on fire. I got up, pulled out my laptop from my backpack, and connected to the motel's patchy Wi-Fi. What did I even search for? Alien door in desert. Vanishing portal. The internet felt too small, too human to contain what I had experienced. I started broad, searching for local legends, strange disappearances, unexplained phenomena in the Sonoran Desert, particularly near the Devil's Backbone Range. Hours passed in a blur of flickering screens and increasingly wild theories. I found anecdotal stories of strange lights, unexplained sounds, hikers vanishing without a trace, but nothing, absolutely nothing, that even remotely resembled a freestanding, vanishing door to an impossibly vast alien complex. Most of what I found was easily dismissible as local folklore, misidentifications, or outright hoaxes. Frustration simmered beneath my exhaustion. Was I truly the only one? Was this a unique event, something stumbled upon by pure, insane chance? The thought was both terrifying and oddly empowering. If I was the only one, then I held a secret that could redefine humanity's understanding of the universe. Or I was insane. The line between the two felt impossibly thin. The sun began to peek over the distant mountains, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. I hadn't slept a wink. My head ached, my eyes burned, and my body felt heavy and slow. I closed the laptop, unable to absorb any more information. The answers weren't in online forums or dusty legends. They were out there in that empty, silent patch of desert. Despite the fear, the thought of returning was already firming in my mind. It wasn't a choice, not really. It was a compulsion. How could I not? I had glimpsed something extraordinary, something that defied explanation. I couldn't just walk away and pretend it hadn't happened. My entire perception of reality had been fractured. To ignore it would be to deny a fundamental shift in my existence. I packed my things mechanically, grabbed another large coffee and some breakfast burritos from the gas station, and started driving back towards the Devil's Backbone. The morning light cast long, clear shadows, making the desert seem less menacing, more familiar. But the familiarity was a lie now. It was a veneer over something vast and unknown. I called Mark. Hey Mark, yeah, I'm good. Just, hit a dead end with the mine. Nothing there. Figured I'd head back tonight. My voice sounded normal, calm, a stark contrast to the frantic drumbeat of my heart. Lies came easy when the truth was impossible. All right, man, long haul, Mark said, his voice sleepy. Safe travels. I hung up, feeling a pang of guilt. But what else could I have done? I needed time to understand, time to prepare. And I knew with absolute certainty that I would go back to that spot, armed with more than just a headlamp and a hunting knife. The drive back to the general area was slow and deliberate. I retraced my tire tracks from the previous day, feeling a strange mix of dread and anticipation. The morning sun was already intense, baking the earth. The air was dry and hot, a comforting familiarity that simultaneously highlighted the unearthly cold of the chamber. I parked my truck in the exact same clearing, surrounded by the same mesquite bushes and boulders. The emptiness where the door had been was still empty. The desert floor was undisturbed. No hint, no ghost of the impossible structure. It was unnerving, the way it had utterly erased itself. I spent the next few hours meticulously surveying the area, pacing grids, looking for any anomaly. I used my small shovel to clear away patches of dust, hoping to find a hidden hinge, a faint outline, anything. Nothing. The ground was just hard-packed earth and scattered stones. It was as if a cosmic eraser had simply wiped it clean. I pulled out my GPS unit, carefully marking the exact coordinates of the spot where the door had stood. This was crucial. If it reappeared, I needed to know precisely where and when. I also set up a small trail camera, one I used for wildlife photography, pointing it directly at the empty patch of ground. It was a long shot, but if the door reappeared, I wanted proof. As the day wore on, the sun climbed higher, relentless and unforgiving. I stayed hydrated, ate my burritos, and tried to quiet the frantic thrum of my thoughts. The longer I sat there, the more absurd my experience seemed in the harsh light of day. But the lingering cold in my fingers, the phantom hum in my ears, kept pulling me back to its reality. Late afternoon, I decided to broaden my search. I walked a wider perimeter, checking behind every large boulder, every dense mesquite thicket. The old prospector's hint about the mine shaft still nagged at me. What if it wasn't a mine shaft in the traditional sense? What if it was a coded message, a misinterpretation of something else? I walked for over an hour further into the rugged terrain. The Devil's Backbone was aptly named, a spine of jagged, volcanic rock formations and steep, narrow canyons. I kept my eyes peeled for any unusual rock formations, any unnatural disturbances. My headlamp was still in my pack, but I was thinking ahead. And then I saw it, not another door, but something almost as out of place. Tucked into a narrow cleft between two massive, sun-baked boulders was a small, crudely built cairn. It wasn't a natural rock pile. Someone had deliberately stacked these stones, and on top of the cairn, secured by a smaller rock, was a piece of aged, weathered canvas. My heart gave a jolt. This was human. A sign. I approached cautiously, my hunting knife held loosely in my hand, more for reassurance than actual defense. The cairn was old, the stones covered in lichen. The canvas was faded, brittle, and stained. I carefully removed the smaller rock and peeled back the canvas. Beneath it was a small, metallic cylinder, no bigger than my thumb, made of tarnished brass. It looked like an old, waterproof container. I unscrewed the cap. Inside, rolled tightly, was a single, yellowed piece of paper. My hands trembled as I unfurled it. The paper was fragile, threatening to tear. It was covered in cramped, looping handwriting, clearly very old. The ink had faded to a sepia tone in places, but was still legible. It read, September 12, 1947. I found it again, after all these years. The door, just as she described it, standing alone, no frame, not a trick of the light, not a mirage, it's real. The cold, the hum, the green symbols, I walked through it, just a few steps. The scale, incomprehensible, a place not of this world. I recoiled, slammed it shut. Fear gripped me like a viper, but the pull, it's strong. I understand now why she never returned to civilization. I've hidden this message for anyone who might follow, for anyone who might also see it. She warned me, said it appears when the veil thins, not a fixed point. It moves like a ripple in a pond, sometimes here, sometimes miles away, but always in the desert, always where the energy is weakest. It feeds on observation, she said, on curiosity. She called herself the Keeper, said she was tasked with watching over it, preventing others from falling in, preventing IT from escaping. But she was tired, so tired. She said her time was ending, that a new watcher would be drawn. I am not the Keeper. I am just a man who saw too much, but I am afraid to leave, afraid it will follow, or that I will be compelled to find it again. It calls to me in my dreams. This is a warning. Do not seek it. Do not open it. If you see the door, run, run, and never look back. It promises wonders, but delivers only dissolution. The cold, the terrible cold. It takes something from you, your will, your soul. I feel it slipping. I hear its hum even when it's gone. It's inside my head now. It wants me to come back. I leaves this here. Maybe a fool will find it, a fool like me. God help you if you do, and God help me, for I know I cannot resist its call much longer. J.D. Blackwood. My breath caught in my throat. J.D. Blackwood, September 12, 1947, 76 years ago. This wasn't a hallucination. This was real. Someone else had seen it. Someone else had been inside, and they had left a warning. The blood drained from my face, leaving me feeling suddenly lightheaded. My initial fear, which had been tempered by curiosity, now returned with a chilling vengeance. Feeds on observation, she said, on curiosity. That sentence echoed in my mind, a cold whisper. I had been observed. My curiosity had been its sustenance. It moves, not a fixed point. That explained why it wasn't where I left it. It calls to me in my dreams. The last line, "I know I cannot resist its call much longer," sent a fresh wave of dread through me. Did that mean Blackwood had gone back? Had he disappeared into it? I folded the fragile paper carefully and placed it back in the brass cylinder, sealing it tightly. I placed the cylinder back in the cairn, covering it with the canvas and the rock. Part of me wanted to keep the message, to study it, to analyze every word. But another part, the primal, terrified part, just wanted to rebury the horror, to pretend I hadn't found it. I walked back to my truck in a daze, the desert sun suddenly feeling oppressive, the silence no longer comforting but menacing. The keeper, a new watcher, drawn. Was I the new watcher? The thought was terrifying. This wasn't an adventure anymore. This was a burden, a curse. I got back to the truck, my mind reeling. I had proof that it wasn't a dream, that I wasn't crazy. But the proof came with a terrifying prophecy. I was being drawn. It wanted me back. I spent the rest of the day in the truck, nursing a growing headache, the message from J.D. Blackwood replaying in my mind. The sun began its descent again, painting the sky in fiery hues identical to the previous night. And as twilight deepened, a new kind of dread settled over me. What if it appeared tonight? Where would it appear? I decided to try something. I drove my truck in a slow, wide circle around the original spot, about a quarter-mile radius, shining my headlights outwards. I drove slowly, my eyes straining into the fading light, searching for any anomaly. Nothing. The desert remained silent, empty. As darkness fully enveloped the landscape, the stars began to emerge just as they had the night before. I parked the truck, killed the engine, and stepped out. The air was cool, dry, and still. I set up my camp chair and just sat, staring into the darkness, my headlamp on low, ready. I felt like a sentry, waiting for an attack I couldn't predict. Hours passed. The moon rose, illuminating the saguaros, turning them into skeletal figures. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional cry of a night bird or the rustle of a desert creature. My eyes scanned the horizon, my ears strained for any unusual sound, any hint of that metallic tang, that acrid ozone smell. My eyelids grew heavy. Exhaustion was finally winning the battle against fear. I fought it, pinching myself, walking around, splashing water on my face. J.D. Blackwood's words echoed, "It calls to me in my dreams." I couldn't fall asleep. Not here, not now. But the body has its limits. Around 3 a.m., despite my best efforts, I nodded off, my head slumping against my chest. I jolted awake, my heart pounding, a cold sweat beating on my forehead. I had no idea how long I'd been out, but it couldn't have been long. A low hum vibrated through the ground, a familiar, deep thrumming that resonated in my bones. The air was frigid, the metallic tang sharp and undeniable. My eyes snapped open, wide and wild. My headlamp beam, still on, cut through the darkness. And there it was. 50 yards away, standing alone against the star-dusted backdrop of the desert night. The door, dark wood, peeling green paint, iron handle, identical in every detail. But it wasn't in the same spot. It was about 100 yards southeast of where it had first appeared, closer to a small, isolated cluster of ocotillo plants. It had moved. The words from Blackwood's note screamed in my head. It moves, like a ripple in a pond, sometimes here, sometimes miles away. My first instinct was to run, to get back in the truck and flee. The fear was overwhelming, but the hum, the cold air, the sheer impossible reality of it held me transfixed. I was terrified, yes, but also morbidly drawn. Blackwood had been right, it called to me. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff, my muscles aching. My hunting knife was still clipped to my belt. I walked towards it, my headlamp beam shaking with the tremor in my hands. The hum intensified with every step, growing into that low roar I remembered from the previous night. The cold air swirled around me, forming plumes of mist from my breath. I reached the door, my eyes scanning for any new details, any subtle changes. None. It was the same impossibly ancient, out-of-place artifact. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and touched the cold, pitted iron handle. It was exactly as I remembered. A voice, J.D. Blackwood's voice, seemed to whisper in my mind, "Do not seek it, do not open it. If you see the door, run." But another voice, one that felt like my own, yet amplified, echoed, "Understand, discover what lies beyond." The compulsion was almost physical, a magnetic pull. My hand twisted the handle, the same heavy, grinding click, the same reluctant creak as the door swung inwards, the same blast of ancient, cold, metallic-smelling air, the same profound, light-swallowing darkness beyond the threshold. This time I was prepared. My headlamp was ready. My resolve was tested but present. I stepped across the threshold, my boots scraping softly on the smooth, dark, light-absorbing floor. The hum rose around me, vibrating through my chest. The glowing green symbol was there, at my feet, pulsing hypnotically. The acrid smell of ozone was stronger now, almost sharp. I scanned the space with my headlamp. It was the same immense, dark void, the same dark, featureless material curving into the blackness, the same distant grid of faint green lights slowly illuminating the outlines of vast, impossible structures. The pillar, the one I had touched, was still there, about 15 feet ahead, glowing with its luminous veins. This time I noticed something else. Along the floor, leading away from the door and towards the pillar, were a series of faint, almost imperceptible depressions. Footprints, not mine. They were larger, wider, and seemed to lead directly to the pillar. Blackwood's footprints or the keeper's. I walked cautiously towards the pillar, following the faint indentations. The hum grew and the cold intensified. As I reached the pillar, I hesitated. Last time my touch had activated something. What would happen this time? My hand reached out, drawn by an irresistible force, and touched the smooth, cold surface. The electric tingle was instantaneous. The symbol under my finger flared, and the entire pillar came alive, the liquid green light flowing faster, more intensely. The deep thrumming sound resonated from within, shaking the ground. And then, just like before, the distant green lights in the vast chamber brightened, revealing more of the incomprehensible architecture. But this time I saw more. Higher up, beyond the reach of my headlamp, the green light illuminated what looked like enormous, intricate scaffolding or perhaps bridges, connecting the tops of the impossibly tall pillars. They seemed to form a massive, interwoven network, disappearing into the absolute darkness above. This wasn't just a chamber, it was a factory, a city, a vast, hidden world operating on principles I couldn't even begin to imagine. As I stood there, mesmerized by the alien grandeur, the hum intensified to a deafening roar. The very air around me began to crackle, and the ozone smell became overpowering. My ears popped, and a strange pressure built behind my eyes. The flowing lights on the pillar pulsed violently, and the green symbol on the floor throbbed with an unnerving rhythm. Then, from the absolute darkness far above, a new light flickered. Not green, but a dull, rusty red. It was tiny at first, a pinprick, but it grew rapidly, hurtling downwards towards the complex below. My heart leaped into my throat. Something was happening, something new. The red light descended with terrifying speed, growing larger, brighter. It wasn't a static light, it seemed to be a craft, an object plummeting through the void. As it got closer, I could discern its shape, not sleek and futuristic, but blunt, almost organic, like a misshapen rock. It was massive, filling my field of vision as it dropped. A surge of pure, unadulterated terror seized me. This wasn't just a place of wonders, it was a place of activity. And whatever that thing was, it was coming fast. The humming became a frantic shriek, tearing at my eardrums. The entire chamber vibrated violently. The red light, now a blinding sphere, descended to what looked like the center of the vast, glowing grid far below. It didn't crash, it simply stopped, hovering silently, radiating that eerie, blood-red glow, illuminating a portion of the alien city that had been cloaked in darkness. And then, from that red sphere, tendrils of blackness began to emerge. Not shadows, but something denser, almost liquid, stretching outwards like grasping tentacles, reaching for the greenlit structures. As these tendrils touched the alien architecture, the green lights would flicker, then dim, and finally extinguish, swallowed by the encroaching blackness. It was like a disease spreading rapidly, consuming the light. This place was under attack, or being dismantled, or consumed. A panic, cold and absolute, finally pushed through my morbid fascination. I had to get out. Now, this wasn't a wonder to be explored. It was a battlefield or a tomb, and I was caught in the middle. I yanked my hand from the pillar. The flowing lights on its surface sputtered, then began to recede. The thrumming subsided slightly, becoming a low growl. The green symbol on the floor dimmed. The red light from the sphere, however, pulsed ominously, and the black tendrils continued their inexorable spread, extinguishing the green lights, turning vast sections of the chamber into utter darkness. I spun around and bolted for the door. The familiar rectangle of desert twilight, my only connection to my world, beckoned like a life raft. My boots slammed on the smooth, dark floor, making no sound as I ran. The air was thick with the ozone smell, and the cold was biting. The door was further away than I remembered, the distance seeming to stretch with every frantic step. The flickering had begun again, just like last time, but this time it was more violent, more erratic. The edges of the door were shimmering, distorting rapidly. It was shrinking. No, 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 I gasped, my lungs burning, the cold air searing them. I pushed harder, my legs churning. The glowing symbol on the floor flashed brightly as I passed it, almost a final taunt. The doorway was barely a sliver now, a thin, wavering line of light. The familiar desert colors outside were a frantic blur of fading yellow and orange. I could feel the strange, pulling sensation in the air, the same distortion that had accompanied its disappearance last time. I dove, throwing myself forward with every ounce of strength I had left. My outstretched hand slapped against empty air, grazing the last vestiges of the shimmering portal just as it contracted to nothingness. A sickening lurch, not a smooth transition, but a violent expulsion. I tumbled forward, landing hard on something soft and gritty. I lay there, gasping for breath, my chest heaving, the metallic tang and cold still clinging to my senses. Slowly, carefully, I pushed myself up. My headlamp beam cut through the darkness. I was outside, in the desert. My truck was there, a solid silhouette. The ocotillo plants were there, rustling faintly in a dry breeze. The stars blazed with indifferent brilliance. But the door was gone, again. I scrambled to my feet, my eyes darting frantically to the spot where it had been just moments before. Nothing, just undisturbed desert floor as if it had never existed. But it had, and this time I had seen more. The red light, the black tendrils, the consumption of the green light. What was happening in there? Was it a war, a harvest? I stumbled back to my truck, my mind reeling, a fresh wave of terror mixed with a frantic, desperate need for understanding. This was far more than a simple door to a forgotten place. It was a dynamic, active phenomenon, and I had just witnessed a part of its alien drama. I got back into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. The familiar scent of old upholstery was a distant comfort. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. The hum was gone, the cold gone, the ozone gone, but the image of the red sphere and the consuming black tendrils was seared into my mind. My hands flew to my pocket, pulling out my phone, still no service. I cursed, slamming my fist against the dashboard. I needed to tell someone. I needed to figure this out. I couldn't be the only one. Blackwood had implied others had been drawn. The keeper. I drove out of the area again, not as frantically this time, but with a fierce determination. I needed real answers, not just ancient warnings. I needed to understand the veil, the energy, the ripple in a pond. I drove all the way back to my small town, pulling into my driveway just as the sun was fully up. My house, a small, dusty adobe, felt suddenly alien. My own life seemed insignificant, unreal, compared to the cosmic drama unfolding just miles away. I tried to sleep, but it was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the red light, the black tendrils, the extinguishing green. My mind was a whirlwind of questions, theories, and desperate fears. I knew I couldn't ignore this. It had chosen me in some twisted, inexplicable way. I spent the next few days in a blur of restless research. I went to the local library, poring over dusty books on local history, geology, and unexplained phenomena. I even ventured into fringe science websites looking for anything that might connect. I found more stories of strange lights, missing persons, even a few vague references to ancient legends of dark places in the mountains, but nothing concrete. My trail camera footage was predictably useless. Just hours of an empty desert night, then a sudden, inexplicable jump in time where the camera had inexplicably shut off, then hours of empty desert morning. The door had appeared and disappeared between frames, leaving no digital trace. It was as if it existed outside of conventional time and space, bypassing normal recording methods. The knowledge from Blackwood's note became my anchor. The keeper, the veil thins, it feeds on observation, on curiosity. It takes something from you, your will, your soul. The last part chilled me to the bone. I felt the pull, the undeniable urge to return, even knowing the danger. Was my will already slipping? Was my curiosity a symptom of the door's subtle influence? I finally made a decision. I couldn't keep this to myself, but I couldn't tell Mark. He was a good guy, but he wasn't equipped for this. I needed someone who dealt with the impossible, or at least someone who believed in it. I remembered an old college professor, Dr. Elias Thorne. He taught anthropology, but his true passion was archaeoastronomy and obscure ancient civilizations. He was an eccentric, known for entertaining outlandish theories, but he was also brilliant and had an open mind. He was the kind of person who might listen without immediately dismissing me as insane. I found his contact information online and sent him a carefully worded email. I didn't reveal everything, just enough to pique his interest without sounding completely unhinged. I mentioned an unusual archaeological discovery in a remote part of the Sonoran, an anomaly that defied known physics, hinting at ancient structures and strange energy signatures. I attached a photo of one of my desert landscape shots, subtly highlighting the specific region, hoping he might recognize something. I didn't expect an immediate reply. Days dragged by, each one a torment of restless energy and fragmented sleep. My dreams were vivid, filled with the hum, the green lights, and the terrifying red sphere. The pull back to the desert, to the door, grew stronger with each passing night. I felt a low-grade anxiety, a constant buzzing in my mind, a sense of being watched or perhaps called. Finally, an email arrived from Dr. Thorne. The subject line read, "Intriguing, when can you meet?" Relief, sharp and potent, flooded through me. Someone was listening, someone might believe. I arranged to meet him at his university office the following week. It felt like an eternity away. I knew I couldn't just sit around and wait. The door was out there, moving, doing whatever it did. I needed to understand its patterns, its movements, its nature. Blackwood had said, "When the veil thins." What did that mean? Atmospheric conditions, celestial alignments, energy fluctuations. I packed my truck again, but this time with far more equipment. High-resolution cameras, a spectrum analyzer, a portable Geiger counter, just in case, extra batteries, more water, more food, and a much more powerful first aid kit. I even bought a satellite phone. If I got trapped or needed help, I wasn't going to be caught unprepared again. I also brought a journal. I intended to meticulously document everything. Blackwood's message had been a vital clue, and I wanted to ensure that if anything happened to me, my experiences would not be lost. Before I left town, I made one more stop, a gun shop. The hunting knife felt woefully inadequate against whatever lay beyond that door. I walked out with a sturdy, reliable revolver and a box of ammunition. I wasn't sure what I expected to shoot, but the cold, heavy weight of the weapon on my hip was a small, if irrational, comfort. I drove back into the desert, not to the exact spot, but to a nearby, more elevated ridge where I could observe the area from a distance without being directly in its potential reappearance zone. I set up a more elaborate camp, complete with a high-powered telescope for scanning the distant terrain at night. My routine became a grueling vigil. I would wake before dawn, scan the desert with binoculars and telescope looking for any anomaly. During the day, I'd conduct wider searches on foot, always with my GPS, marking potential energy points, geological oddities, or anything that felt off. At night, I'd return to my observation point, setting up my cameras and spectral analyzers, hoping to catch a glimpse, a reading, anything. Days bled into nights. I saw nothing. The desert was vast, empty, and silent. My equipment registered no unusual energy spikes, no strange radiation, no anomalous atmospheric conditions. It was as if the door and the complex behind it existed in a parallel reality, only occasionally breaching our own. The lack of activity was almost worse than its reappearance. It fostered a creeping paranoia. Was it watching me? Was it waiting? Was Blackwood right that it feeds on observation? Was my intense scrutiny actually deterring it? The constant vigilance, the relentless focus on the impossible, began to take its toll. I grew gaunt, my eyes sunken, perpetually tired. The dreams intensified, becoming more lucid, more detailed. I would walk through the complex, see the intricate symbols, hear the hum, feel the cold. Sometimes I'd see shadowy figures in the distance, just at the edge of my dream vision, too indistinct to make out. They never acknowledged me, just moved with purpose through the alien structures. I began to question my sanity. Was I merely chasing a phantom, a figment of an overtired mind? But the memory of the cold, the metallic tang, the tangible weight of the door, it was too real. And Blackwood's note was in my journal, folded carefully. Then one evening, on the fifth night of my vigil, something shifted. I was scanning the horizon with my binoculars, the moon a sliver in the sky, when I saw it. Not the door itself, but a distortion in the air. It was faint, like heat haze shimmering over asphalt, but it was in a specific spot about 2 miles from my observation point, deep in a rugged canyon that I hadn't been able to thoroughly explore on foot. The air seemed to ripple, distorting the stars behind it. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a mirage. The air was cool and there was no heat source. This was the shimmering Blackwood had described, the thinning of the veil. I grabbed my satellite phone and punched in the coordinates of the distortion. I also set up my high-powered camera on its tripod, aimed directly at the shimmering spot, and began recording. Then I jumped into my truck. I knew it was dangerous, foolish even, to go towards it, but the compulsion was overwhelming. This was my chance. This was what I had been waiting for. The drive was agonizing. The terrain was rough, forcing me to drive slowly, bouncing over rocks and through dry washes. The shimmering spot remained visible, a distant beacon of impossibility. As I got closer, the air grew noticeably colder, and that faint, acrid smell of ozone began to prickle my nostrils. Finally, I parked the truck as close as the terrain would allow, still a few hundred yards away. I grabbed my headlamp, my revolver, my Geiger counter, and my journal, and began to walk. The shimmering grew more pronounced with every step. It was like looking through faulty glass, the desert landscape beyond it wavering and twisting. The cold intensified, and I could hear a faint, low hum resonating through the ground. And then, just like a photograph slowly developing, the door began to materialize within the distortion. First, a faint outline, then the dark wood, the peeling green paint, the iron handle. It was slowly solidifying, coalescing into physical reality. It was in a new spot deep in the canyon, nestled between two ancient, twisted saguaros. It looked utterly out of place, yet undeniably real. I raised my Geiger counter. The needle jumped, then settled on a low but distinct radiation reading. It wasn't dangerous, but it was definitely anomalous. This confirmed it. Something was different about this place, about this door. I approached cautiously, my revolver in one hand, the Geiger counter in the other. The hum was louder now, a low growl that vibrated through the canyon walls. The air was frigid, misting with my breath. The metallic scent was strong. The door stood before me, solidifying from the shimmering distortion of air, dark wood, and peeling green paint stark against the rugged desert backdrop. It was in a narrow crevice flanked by two towering saguaros whose arms seemed to reach out like ancient sentinels. The hum resonated not just in my bones, but now felt like it vibrated through the very rock of the canyon. The air was thick with the metallic tang of ozone, cold enough to make my breath plume like smoke. My Geiger counter crackled softly, its needle quivering in the low range but confirming an anomalous radiation signature. This wasn't just a trick of the light, not some desert madness. It was real, undeniable, and it radiated an energy that defied all natural laws. I reached the threshold, my hand automatically going to the revolver, unholstering it and gripping the cold metal. What was I expecting to encounter? An alien? A monster? The thought was absurd, yet the primal fear was very real. I pushed it down. Curiosity, as Blackwood had warned, was a powerful, dangerous force, and it was pulling me forward. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cold, rough wood of the doorframe. It felt impossibly old, worn by ages untold. The peeling paint was still green, a familiar, unsettling shade. I hesitated for only a moment, then gripped the heavy iron handle. It was cold, slick, with condensation from the frigid air pouring out from beyond. With a deep, shuddering breath, I turned the handle. The mechanism groaned, a sound that felt like it echoed through centuries. The door swung inward with a slow, deliberate creak, revealing the familiar, absolute darkness of the alien complex. The cold air rushed out, enveloping me, stealing the warmth from my skin. The ozone smell was pungent, almost choking. My headlamp beam cut through the void, illuminating the smooth, dark floor and the pulsing green symbol at my feet. The hum was a low roar, shaking my entire body. I stepped across the threshold, my boots making no sound on the light-absorbing surface. The outside world, the familiar desert, seemed to vanish behind me, swallowed by the intensity of this alien space. The familiar pillar stood ahead, about 15 feet away, its luminous green veins pulsing with a rhythmic glow. Beyond it, the vast, geometric grid of faint green lights slowly began to emerge from the darkness, outlining the impossible architecture that stretched into the unseen depths. The scale of it was just as overwhelming as before, breathtaking and terrifying. My eyes scanned the floor. Yes, the faint depressions, the larger, wider footprints were still there, leading from the door towards the pillar. Blackwood's path, or the keeper's. I followed them, my revolver held ready, my Geiger counter clutched in my other hand. The low radiation reading intensified as I approached the pillar. As I reached the pillar, I stopped, staring up at its immense height, its glassy, smooth surface. The air around it crackled with latent energy. This time, I didn't reach out immediately. I remembered the red light, the black tendrils, the consumption of the green. What had triggered that? My touch, or something else entirely? I pulled out my journal and a pen, scribbling furiously. Third entry, door reappeared in new location, canyon southeast of previous site. Radiation detected. Inside now, same complex. Unchanged for now. No red light or tendrils visible. Approaching pillar. I looked up. The distant green grid was stable, pulsing gently. No sign of the red sphere or the consuming blackness. It was calm, too calm. I took a deep breath. I needed more data. I needed to understand what this place was and why it was appearing. I reached out, my fingers hovering just inches from the pillar's surface. The electric tingle was already there, a subtle vibration in the air. My fingertips made contact. The instantaneous flare of the symbol beneath my touch was blinding. The entire pillar pulsed violently, the liquid green light rushing up and down its length with frantic speed. The deep thrumming erupted from within the pillar, shaking the floor, rattling my teeth. My Geiger counter shrieked, its needle jumping into the red zone, a rapid, alarming barrage of clicks. The ozone smell became an acrid burn in my nose and throat. The green lights of the vast chamber, already dim, suddenly intensified, burning brighter than before. They weren't just outlining structures now, they were illuminating details. I saw massive conduits running along the towering pillars, intricate machinery integrated into the walls, catwalks and platforms suspended impossibly high. The place was a colossal machine, awake and active. Then, from the depths of the chamber, from the absolute blackness far, far above the highest visible structures, a sound began to echo. It wasn't the hum nor the thrum. It was a faint, high-pitched whirring, like countless gears turning in unison, growing louder, more intricate, building in a terrifying crescendo. My head snapped up, trying to pierce the gloom. The faint green lights continued to brighten, revealing more of the architectural wonders above, and then I saw them. They were everywhere, tiny, indistinct shapes like swarms of insects moving through the air far above the structures. Thousands, perhaps millions of them. They weren't flying, they seemed to be flowing, moving with an eerie, silent grace, and they were descending. My mind raced. Were these the shadowy figures from my dreams? Were they the inhabitants, the builders, or something else entirely? The whirring intensified, becoming a deafening, vibrating roar that pressed in on my chest. The very air seemed to thicken, becoming almost viscous. The pressure behind my eyes returned, stronger this time, almost painful. My ears popped repeatedly. The tiny shapes grew larger, clearer. They weren't organic, not insects. They were intricate metallic constructs, each no bigger than my fist, resembling complex clockwork mechanisms with multiple tiny limbs and glowing blue optical sensors. They descended in unison, a shimmering cloud, a cascade of alien technology. My fear, which had been lurking, now surged to the forefront, raw and visceral. This was too much, too fast. I yanked my hand from the pillar, stumbling backward. The pillar's lights dimmed instantly, the frantic thrumming receding to a low growl. The green symbol at my feet softened its pulse. The distant green lights in the chamber also began to dim, retreating into the darkness. But the descending swarm of metallic constructs did not stop. Their whirring remained, a chilling symphony of alien engineering. They continued their descent, now visible even without the brighter chamber lights, their blue optical sensors piercing the gloom like 1,000 tiny stars. They were heading towards the lower levels of the complex, towards the area where the red sphere had pulsed and the black tendrils had spread. I backed away from the pillar, my eyes darting between the door and the approaching swarm. I had to get out. My journal and Geiger counter clattered to the floor as my hand tightened on the grip of my revolver. It felt utterly useless here. I turned and bolted for the door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the metallic whirring. The blue lights of the swarm were growing larger, closer, and with them, a new, unsettling sensation. I felt a faint pull, not physical but mental, like an invisible thread tugging at my thoughts, drawing me deeper, trying to make me stop. Feeds on observation, on curiosity, Blackwood's words flashed in my mind. It takes something from you, your will, your soul. I fought against it, forcing my legs to move faster. The rectangle of twilight that marked the door was still there, but it had already begun to flicker, its edges blurring and distorting. It was shrinking again. "No!" I screamed, the sound swallowed by the whirring and the vastness. I pushed myself harder, gasping, my lungs burning in the frigid air. The glowing symbol on the floor pulsed violently as I ran over it, as if to mark my frantic passage. The door was a mere slit now, a rapidly diminishing line of light. The outside world was a kaleidoscope of fading colors, a last desperate glimpse of reality. The mental pull intensified, trying to root me to the spot, to turn me back towards the descending swarm, towards the alien wonders and terrors. With a final, desperate burst of adrenaline, I launched myself forward. My fingers brushed against the shimmering, distorting edge of the portal, and then, with that same sickening lurch, it vanished. I tumbled forward, falling hard onto gritty, familiar desert sand. I lay there, gasping, my body aching, my mind reeling. The metallic whirring still echoed in my ears, a phantom sound. The cold, the ozone, the pressure, all were gone. Slowly, I pushed myself up, my hands trembling, my headlamp beam cut through the darkness. I was outside. Again, my truck was there. The saguaro stood tall against the brilliant, indifferent stars. The air was warm, dry, and still. The door was gone. The empty patch of desert stretched before me, undisturbed. I stood there, heart hammering, trying to process the newest layer of impossible reality. The swarm, the metallic constructs, the mental pull. This place was not just a static structure. It was alive, active, perhaps even sentient in some unfathomable way. I scrambled back to my truck, my movements stiff and uncoordinated. I slammed the door shut, locking it. My hands flew to the satellite phone, dialing Mark's number without thinking. It rang, then went to voicemail. It was still too late or too early for him to be awake. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, my mind a whirlpool of fear, adrenaline, and a terrifying, unquenchable thirst for knowledge. The journal and Geiger counter. I had dropped them inside, left them in that alien place. A fresh wave of panic hit me. My proof, my tools, lost. No, not lost, taken. Blackwood's words, it feeds on observation, on curiosity. And now it had my journal filled with my observations, and my Geiger counter, my tool of curiosity. A chill went through me, colder than the air of the alien complex. I drove away from the canyon, not in a blind panic this time, but with a growing sense of dread and a chilling resolve. I had to tell Dr. Thorne everything. The meeting couldn't come fast enough. I had stumbled upon something far more profound and far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. I checked into the same cheap motel, exhaustion pulling at every fiber of my being, but sleep still wouldn't come. My mind was too active, too agitated. The whirring of the metallic swarm echoed in my ears, and the mental tug, though faint, still lingered. The next few days were a blur. I tried to rest, to eat, to think clearly, but the images from inside the door haunted me. The sheer scale of the complex, the luminous green, the terrifying red sphere and black tendrils, and now the metallic swarm. It was all so utterly alien, so beyond comprehension. The loss of my journal and Geiger counter weighed heavily on me. It felt personal, like a piece of me had been taken. Was it a deliberate act? A way for the entity to feed on my curiosity, to learn about me? The paranoia was setting in, deep and cold. Finally, the day of my meeting with Dr. Elias Thorne arrived. I drove to the university, my stomach a knot of nerves. The campus felt alien in its normalcy, a world away from the secrets hidden in the desert. Dr. Thorne's office was exactly as I remembered it, overflowing with books, ancient maps, bizarre artifacts, and stacks of papers. He was a small, wiry man in his late 60s, with a shock of unruly white hair and eyes that twinkled with perpetual curiosity behind thick spectacles. Alex, good to see you, my boy, he said, rising from behind a desk piled high with dusty tomes. His voice was gravelly, his handshake firm. Come in, come in. You mentioned an unusual archaeological discovery. Intrigued is an understatement. Your email was cryptic but compelling. You've certainly found yourself in an interesting corner of the Sonoran if your photo is any indication. I sat in a visitor's chair, feeling suddenly overwhelmed. How do I start? Dr. Thorne, thank you for seeing me. I'm not sure where to begin. What I'm about to tell you, it's going to sound insane. He leaned back, a small smile playing on his lips. My dear Alex, I've spent my life studying the insane. Theories of ancient astronauts, forgotten civilizations with impossible technologies, interdimensional portals hidden in plain sight. These are my bread and butter. So don't hold back, just give me the facts as you experienced them. Encouraged by his open demeanor, I took a deep breath and began. I started from the very beginning, the search for the mine shaft, the initial sighting of the door, the cold, the hum, the green symbols. I described my first terrifying entry, the impossible vastness, the fear and awe, and the door's disappearance. Dr. Thorne listened intently, his expression unreadable, occasionally nodding, sometimes taking notes on a small pad. He didn't interrupt, didn't scoff, didn't show any signs of disbelief. Then I told him about Blackwood's note, recounting every word, including the chilling warnings about the veil thinning, the door moving, and its nature to feed on observation and curiosity, taking will and soul. He paused, stroking his chin thoughtfully. J.D. Blackwood, the name rings a faint bell. A prospector, perhaps, or a desert eccentric. I recall a mention in some old archives, but nothing substantial. Fascinating. So others have encountered this door. And then I went back, Dr. Thorne, I continued, my voice barely a whisper. Just days ago, it reappeared in a new location, exactly as Blackwood described. I brought equipment, a Geiger counter. It showed radiation. I went back inside. I described my second entry, the re-encounter with the vast, green-lit complex, the familiar pillar, and then the red sphere descending, the black tendrils spreading, consuming the light. The sheer terror, the frantic escape. His eyes widened slightly at that. A red sphere, black tendrils, consuming the light. Alex, this is extraordinary. Are you suggesting some kind of internal conflict, or perhaps a process of assimilation or dismantling? I don't know, I admitted, running a hand through my hair. It was terrifying. But then I went back a third time just last night. It had moved again, and this time, Dr. Thorne, I saw something new. After I touched the pillar, the lights in the complex brightened and a swarm of metallic constructs, small with blue lights, descended from above. And I felt a pull, a mental pull trying to make me stay. I detailed the loss of my journal and Geiger counter, the chilling implication that they were taken, not just dropped. Dr. Thorne sat in silence for a long moment, his eyes thoughtful, a strange glint in them. He picked up a peculiar spherical rock from his desk, turning it over and over in his hands. Alex, he finally said, his voice quiet, what you describe, it aligns with certain ancient narratives I've encountered. Not specific to the Sonoran, mind you, but across disparate cultures there are consistent themes. Doors between worlds, places of immense power, beings that feed on abstract concepts like curiosity or fear, veils between dimensions. And the keeper, a recurring motif in such legends, a guardian or perhaps a steward of these gateways. He put the rock down, leaning forward. The radiation reading is significant. It suggests a distortion of physical laws, a localized energy field. The veil thinning could refer to a weakening of this energetic barrier, allowing the door to manifest in our reality. And the door moving, it's not simply appearing randomly. It might be following a ley line or a planetary energy grid, manifesting at points of intersection or weakness. The desert, being geologically stable and relatively undisturbed by human activity, would be an ideal location for such a manifestation. "So you believe me?" I asked, a wave of relief washing over me. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Alex, I believe in inquiry, and your account, however fantastical, is consistent, detailed, and resonates with certain theoretical frameworks. You've stumbled onto something truly remarkable, perhaps unprecedented in modern history. The question is, what now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I feel compelled to go back. Blackwood's note said it calls to me in dreams, and it does. I can't just walk away, Dr. Thorne. It's changed everything, but I also know it's dangerous. I lost my journal and Geiger counter inside, and what was that red sphere and the swarm?" "The pull you described, Alex, is concerning," he said, his smile fading. "The idea of it consuming will and soul is metaphorical, of course, but it could signify a psychic drain, a form of mental subjugation. This entity or the mechanisms within seem to interact on multiple levels: physical, energetic, and potentially consciousness itself." He stood up, walking to a large bookshelf overflowing with books. He pulled out a worn, leather-bound volume, its pages brittle with age. "I've dedicated my life to exploring the impossible. Many call it madness. I call it expanding the boundaries of human knowledge. What you've described, Alex, is a direct challenge to every paradigm we hold dear." He opened the book, flipping through its pages. There are accounts scattered throughout history of individuals who encountered such doors, often disappearing without a trace. Some were said to have returned, changed, speaking of other worlds, other realities. Others became keepers, as Blackwood mentioned, consumed by their role. He looked up, his eyes intense. "You said you lost your journal and Geiger counter. That's a problem. Your observations are critical. We need to document this scientifically, methodically. We need to understand its parameters, when it appears, where it appears, what triggers its activity, its internal mechanisms. And those constructs, their purpose is unknown." "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice filled with a desperate urgency. "We gather more data," Dr. Thorne stated, his academic enthusiasm clearly overriding any personal fear. "We don't go in blindly, Alex. We go in prepared. If Blackwood's note is accurate and it appears when the veil thins, there might be environmental or astronomical factors at play. Lunar cycles, solar flares, specific planetary alignments, even local seismic activity could be influencing its manifestation. We need a comprehensive monitoring system. A team." "A team?" I asked, suddenly feeling a surge of anxiety. This was my secret, my burden, sharing it, exposing others to the danger. "Yes, a team," he affirmed. "You've gone in 3 times alone, Alex. Each time you risked your life. Each time you saw more, learned more, but alone you are vulnerable. I have contacts, colleagues who specialize in anomalous energy fields, theoretical physics, cryptolinguistics. They are discreet, professional, and more importantly, open-minded. They are also well-funded. This isn't just an archaeological find, Alex. This is a first contact scenario. Or something far more complex." "First contact with what?" I asked, the words feeling heavy in the air. "That, my dear boy, is the million-dollar question," he said, a glint in his eye. "An ancient civilization, an interdimensional gateway, a highly advanced artificial intelligence, we don't know, but we have a unique opportunity to find out. This door, it seems to be calling to you specifically. You are the conduit. Perhaps the keeper truly was seeking a successor." The idea of being a successor, a watcher, sent a shiver down my spine. It felt less like an honor and more like a curse. I can't go back alone again, Dr. Thorne, I admitted. I'm terrified, but I also know I have to go back. I have to understand. And you won't be alone, Alex. Not this time, he assured me. But we need to be strategic. We need to observe the patterns of its appearance. We need to develop protocols for interaction. And most importantly, we need to ensure our safety. This isn't a game, it's a genuine leap into the unknown. He picked up his phone. I'm going to make some calls. My friend Dr. Eris Thorne, no relation, ironically, is a theoretical physicist specializing in exotic matter and quantum mechanics. He has access to equipment that would make your Geiger counter look like a child's toy. And Dr. Lena Petrova, a xenolinguist with a background in ancient scripts. Her insights into those glowing symbols could be invaluable. He paused, looking at me intently. Alex, are you truly prepared for this? This will consume your life. There will be no turning back. Your world, as you knew it, is gone. You are now at the forefront of something truly revolutionary or truly catastrophic. Are you ready to be part of that? I thought of the empty desert, the vanishing door, the immense alien complex, the red sphere, the black tendrils, the metallic swarm. I thought of Blackwood's chilling warning and the undeniable pull I felt towards it. Yes, Dr. Thorne, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. I'm ready. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Thorne wasted no time. He made calls, sent emails, and arranged for a meeting with his team within a week. I stayed in his spare office, poring over ancient texts and theoretical physics papers, trying to grasp even a fraction of what I was about to face. My mind, once focused on simple desert survival, was now stretched to its absolute limit, grappling with concepts of space-time distortion, interdimensional travel, and alien intelligence. Dr. Eris Thorne, when I finally met him, was a sharp, intense man in his 40s, with a perpetually furrowed brow and a mind that seemed to operate at light speed. He looked at my account of the door with a mixture of skepticism and profound excitement, his questions rapid-fire, precise, and utterly technical. He seemed most intrigued by the shimmering and the pull I described, theorizing about localized gravitational anomalies and consciousness-based energy fields. Dr. Lena Petrova was a more reserved figure, a quiet woman with keen, observant eyes. She was fascinated by my descriptions of the glowing green symbols, spending hours with me, asking me to sketch them from memory, scrutinizing every curve and line. She believed they were a language, perhaps even a form of direct energy transfer, not just decorative markings. We held long, intense meetings in Dr. Thorne's office, developing a plan. The primary objective: locate the door again, monitor its appearance, and gather comprehensive data from a safe distance using advanced sensory equipment. The secondary objective, if it proved safe, to send in a small, specially equipped team to retrieve my lost items and attempt further reconnaissance. I was designated as the primary guide for its location, given my unique connection to its appearance. Eris brought a formidable array of equipment: advanced spectral analyzers, thermal imaging cameras, gravimeters, magnetometers, and a much more powerful radiation detector, along with a drone equipped with various sensors for aerial surveillance. Lena had specially designed recording devices, not just for sound, but for energy patterns she believed were associated with the symbols. Our field base was set up a few days later, miles from any road, deep in the Sonoran Desert, not far from where the door had last appeared. It was a well-equipped, camouflaged expedition camp, complete with satellite uplink, power generators, and comfortable living quarters. Dr. Thorne had spared no expense. We spent days calibrating equipment, running simulations, and practicing emergency protocols. Eris set up a complex grid of sensors across the general area where the door had appeared, hoping to detect any precursor energy signatures before it materialized. Lena began to analyze the energy patterns in the desert itself, looking for subtle fluctuations that might correlate with the thinning of the veil. The waiting was excruciating. Every sunset, every sunrise, I felt that familiar dread and anticipation. My dreams continued, growing more vivid, more insistent. I saw the green lights, the vast structures, the hum, the cold, and always the shadowy figures moving with purpose, their blue eyes, if they had them, never quite visible. The mental pull was a constant, low thrum in my consciousness. "Are you sure you're not just projecting, Alex?" Eris asked me one night as we watched the endless starfield from our observation post. The dreams, the pull, it could be psychological. The mind, under extreme stress, can create powerful illusions. "Maybe," I conceded, "but the cold, the ozone, the radiation, that's not in my head, Eris." "Agreed," he said, adjusting his night vision goggles. "But be vigilant. The human mind is its own most dangerous landscape." Days turned into a week. No door, no shimmering, no anomalous readings from Eris's elaborate sensor grid. The desert remained vast, empty, and silent. The scientific approach, so meticulously planned, was yielding nothing. We were tracking a ghost. Frustration grew within the team. Lena tirelessly analyzed reams of energy data, muttering about subtle harmonic fluctuations that didn't quite coalesce into a predictive pattern. Eris grumbled about the randomness of quantum phenomena. Dr. Thorne remained outwardly patient, but I could see the subtle lines of worry deepening around his eyes. I, however, felt a growing certainty. It wasn't random, it was waiting, watching, and it was calling to me. One afternoon, as the sun beat down mercilessly, I decided to revisit the cairn where I'd found Blackwood's note. No one else knew about it. I felt a need to reconnect with that forgotten warning, to remind myself of the very real danger. I drove out alone, telling the team I was scouting for new observation points. The drive was hot, dusty, and lonely. I found the narrow cleft between the boulders, the cairn still there, untouched. I carefully removed the top rock, the canvas, and extracted the tarnished brass cylinder. I unrolled the fragile paper, reading Blackwood's cramped handwriting once more. It feeds on observation, on curiosity. It takes something from you, your will, your soul. It calls to me in my dreams. My eyes caught on a small, almost imperceptible detail at the bottom of the page. A tiny, faint sketch. It was a crude drawing, almost invisible in the faded ink, but unmistakable. It was one of the glowing green symbols from the pillar, simplified, almost childlike, but undeniably the same intricate knot of lines and curves. Blackwood hadn't just seen it. He had remembered it, sketched it, and perhaps understood something about it. As I held the paper, tracing the faint symbol with my finger, a sudden, sharp pain flared behind my eyes. It was like a needle piercing my skull, a blinding white flash. The desert around me seemed to spin, colors distorting, sounds muffling. The metallic tang, the cold, the hum, they were all suddenly there, overwhelming my senses. I dropped the paper, clutching my head. The pain was excruciating, searing. I fell to my knees, gasping for air. My vision swam, and the desert seemed to dissolve around me. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to fight it, trying to push away the invading sensations. When I opened my eyes again, the pain was gone, replaced by a profound, chilling clarity. I was still kneeling by the cairn, the sun still beating down, but something was different. I looked down at the paper. The sketch of the green symbol was still there, but now it seemed to glow faintly, a subtle, ethereal luminescence that hadn't been there before. It pulsed softly in sync with a faint, almost imperceptible hum that resonated deep within my own chest. I felt connected to the symbol, to the hum, to something vast and unseen. It wasn't the mental pull I'd felt before. This was deeper, more fundamental, as if a new channel had been opened within me. I looked at the cairn, then at the surrounding desert. It no longer felt merely like sand and rock. It felt like a thin membrane stretched taut over an immense living energy. I could almost sense the hidden currents, the subtle shifts, the presence of something ancient and powerful just beneath the surface. I closed my eyes, focusing on the hum within me. It felt like a frequency, a wavelength. And as I focused, an image began to form in my mind, faint at first, then sharpening into startling clarity. It was a map, not a traditional map, but a shimmering, energetic representation of the desert landscape. And on this map, a single glowing point, pulsing with green light. It was the door. It was here, not far, about 5 miles away, deeper in the same canyon system, hidden from our camp by a series of jagged ridges. My breath caught in my throat. I had found it, not by technology, not by scientific prediction, but by a sudden, inexplicable internal connection. Blackwood's new watcher, the call in my dreams, it wasn't just a mental suggestion. It was a literal connection, a resonance. I scrambled to my feet, the paper still clutched in my hand. The glowing symbol on it pulsed in sync with the internal hum. I had to get back to the camp. I had to tell them. But as I turned to go, a different thought, cold and calculating, slipped into my mind. A thought that felt like my own, yet resonated with that subtle internal hum. They won't understand. They are too slow, too physical. You are the conduit. You are the only one who can truly perceive. It was the pull, magnified, insidious, disguised as my own rationale. It was the will Blackwood warned about. I hesitated. The team, with all their equipment, had failed to locate it. I simply, by holding an old piece of paper and feeling a strange connection, had found it. It was a powerful, intoxicating thought. Go alone, witness, understand. The internal hum intensified, urging me forward. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it was precisely what Blackwood had warned against. But the allure was overwhelming. The idea of being the sole witness, the sole discoverer, the one who truly understood, it was a potent drug. My hand still held the revolver. I still had the satellite phone. I could go observe and report back. What harm could come from that? I was just going to look. I turned back towards the direction the internal map indicated. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in fiery hues. The shadows were lengthening, perfect time for the veil to thin. I got back in my truck, but instead of driving back to camp, I turned off the track, heading deeper into the canyons, following the internal compass that pulsed with the green light. The desert seemed to embrace me, its silence no longer menacing, but comforting, conspiratorial. The drive was slow, difficult, over extremely rough terrain. The internal hum grew stronger with every mile, guiding me through dry washes and over rocky ridges. The cold air began to seep in through the truck's vents, carrying that faint, metallic tang. Finally, the glowing point on my internal map flared brighter. I parked the truck, grabbed my headlamp, my revolver, and the satellite phone. The hum was now audible, a low thrumming that resonated through the ground. The air was frigid, my breath plumed. And there it was, standing alone in a hidden alcove carved by eons of wind and water, a place I never would have found by chance. The door, dark wood, peeling green paint, iron handle, identical, unchanged. My heart pounded, but it was a different kind of beat this time. Less frantic fear, more determined awe. The internal hum resonated in my chest, a deep, steady rhythm that felt intertwined with the door's presence. I felt ready, connected. I approached it, the revolver held loosely in my hand, my headlamp cutting through the deepening twilight. The hum intensified, growing into that low roar. The cold air swirled around me. The ozone smell was pungent. I reached the door, placed my hand on the cold iron handle. The symbol on Blackwood's paper, still clutched in my other hand, pulsed faintly. Open it, the thought, both mine and not mine, whispered in my mind, go deeper. I turned the handle, the familiar ancient groan. The door swung inward, revealing the absolute darkness, the blast of frigid metallic air, the pulsing green symbol on the floor. I stepped across the threshold, my boots scraping softly. The hum enveloped me. The green symbol at my feet flared. The vast, impossible complex began to reveal itself in the deepening green light. The pillar, its luminous veins pulsing. The distant grid, the immense structures, the absolute void. No red sphere, no black tendrils, no metallic swarm. It was calm, waiting. I walked towards the pillar, my eyes scanning the vastness. The internal hum was a powerful, guiding force. I reached the pillar, placed my hand upon its cold, smooth surface. The electric tingle was instantaneous, surging up my arm, through my body, and into my mind. It was more intense than ever, a powerful jolt that didn't hurt, but instead felt like an awakening. The green symbol under my finger flared, brilliant and blinding, and the entire pillar erupted in liquid green light. The deep thrumming sound resonated from within, shaking the ground violently, vibrating through my bones. But this time, it wasn't just noise and light. As the pillar pulsed, I felt a cascade of information flow into my mind. Not words, not images, but concepts, feelings, raw data. It was overwhelming, a torrent of alien understanding that threatened to shatter my sanity. I saw immense, swirling energy patterns, vast networks of connected consciousness, and a sense of profound, ancient purpose. The green lights in the chamber flared, brighter than they had ever been, banishing the shadows, revealing the true, mind-boggling scale of the place. It wasn't just scaffolding. It was a living, breathing city built on principles of light and sound. The structures were impossibly complex, interwoven with crystalline conduits, glowing filaments, and vast, humming chambers. I saw platforms suspended by invisible forces and colossal, elegant machines that seemed to process pure energy. The air itself shimmered with residual power. And higher up, far beyond the reach of any earthly light, I saw the true extent of the network. Bridges, or rather, energy pathways, connected the tops of the impossibly tall pillars, forming a colossal web that stretched further than my eyes could comprehend, disappearing into the true vastness of the dimension. This wasn't a hidden world, it was a universe contained. I stood transfixed, my hands still pressed against the pillar, the torrent of information washing over me. The internal hum within my chest was now a roaring symphony, perfectly in tune with the thrumming of the pillar. The green symbol on Blackwood's paper, still clutched in my other hand, glowed with an unnerving, pulsating light, mirroring the symbol beneath my fingers. Then, from the depths of the chamber, from the absolute darkness far above, a new light flickered. Not red this time, but a deep, resonant blue. It was tiny at first, a pinprick, but it grew rapidly, hurtling downwards towards the complex below. My heart leaped into my throat. Something was happening, something new. The blue light descended with terrifying speed, growing larger, brighter. It wasn't a static light, it seemed to be a craft, an object plummeting through the void. As it got closer, I could discern its shape, sleek, almost fluid, like a drop of mercury elongated into a teardrop. It was smaller than the red sphere, but still substantial, filling my field of vision as it dropped. A surge of pure, unadulterated awe mixed with a strange familiarity seized me. This wasn't just a place of wonders, it was a place of activity. And whatever that thing was, it was coming fast. The humming became a frantic shriek, tearing at my eardrums. The entire chamber vibrated violently. The blue light, now a blinding sphere, descended to what looked like the very center of the vast, glowing grid far below, to a colossal, spire-like structure that shimmered with an inner luminescence. It didn't crash, it simply docked. Seamlessly integrating itself into the spire, radiating that eerie, deep blue glow, illuminating a portion of the alien city that had been cloaked in the green light. And then from that blue sphere, something began to emerge, not tendrils of blackness, but figures, tall, slender, almost ethereal, their forms shimmering with a faint inner blue light. They moved with an unnerving grace, their movements fluid and precise, like living currents of energy. There were dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, stepping out onto the platforms and catwalks of the central spire. These were the shadowy figures from my dreams, but now they were real, distinct. They weren't shadowy, they were beings of light. They were everywhere, moving through the illuminated pathways, their blue light contrasting sharply with the dominant green of the complex. They seemed to be performing tasks, interacting with the glowing conduits, touching the colossal machines. It was like a city coming to life, a dormant hive suddenly bustling with activity. My mind reeled. These were the inhabitants, the keepers, or something else entirely. I yanked my hand from the pillar, stumbling backward, the surge of information receding, replaced by a dizzying disorientation. The pillar's light dimmed, the thrumming subsided, and the green symbol at my feet softened its pulse. The distant green lights in the chamber also began to dim, retreating into the darkness, once again obscuring the true scale of the city and its new, blue-lit occupants. But the blue-lit figures remained, their activity concentrated around the central spire, their movements purposeful and unwavering. They hadn't noticed me, or perhaps they didn't care. I stood there trembling, trying to process it all. The internal hum in my chest was still there, but muted, a low thrumming that felt like an aftershock. The pain behind my eyes had subsided, replaced by a dull ache, but the new connections, the influx of alien data remained. I felt expanded, overloaded. I looked at the door, the rectangle of desert twilight still visible, albeit flickering faintly. An escape route, a connection to my reality. But the fear that had always driven me towards it was now tempered by something else, a profound sense of wonder and a terrifying, unshakable urge to understand. The pull was no longer just a vague mental tug, it was a deeply embedded resonance, an undeniable connection to this place. Blackwood's note, still clutched in my hand, pulsed faintly. New Watcher. Was this what he meant? Had the door chosen me not just to observe, but to interface? I closed my eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. When I opened them, my gaze was drawn not to the door, but to the glowing symbol on the floor, now a soft green pulse. I had lost my journal and Geiger counter before, my tools for objective observation. Now I had a new tool, my own mind. I started walking, not towards the door, but deeper into the complex, towards the immense central spire from which the blue-lit beings had emerged. My revolver, still in my other hand, felt like a useless artifact from a forgotten world. My headlamp beam, weak and insignificant, illuminated only a few feet in front of me, but I didn't need it. The internal hum, the connection, was guiding me. The smooth, dark floor absorbed the faint sound of my boots. The air grew colder, thick with the ozone scent. The green lights of the complex, though dimmer, still provided enough illumination for me to navigate. As I walked, the faint green symbol on the floor pulsed rhythmically ahead of me, like a cosmic breadcrumb trail. It was guiding me, leading me through the labyrinthine lower levels of the complex. I passed glowing conduits, massive, silent machinery, and vast, empty spaces that hummed with latent energy. The sheer scale was incomprehensible, dwarfing anything I could have ever imagined. The internal hum grew stronger, and the information flow, though not as intense as when I touched the pillar, was a constant, low-level stream. I began to understand, not logically, but intuitively, the purpose of some of the structures. This wasn't just a city, it was a vast, self-sustaining ecosystem, a colossal machine designed to process and transmute energy. It was a bridge, a focal point. I reached the edge of a massive chasm, a dizzying drop into absolute darkness. But stretched across it, shimmering with faint green light, was a pathway. Not a bridge, but a cohesive field of energy, solid enough to walk on. It pulsed with the same green light as the symbols, and the internal hum vibrated in perfect harmony with it. I hesitated, looking down into the abyss. This was a true leap of faith. The logical part of my mind screamed for me to stop, to turn back, to question my sanity. But the pull, the connection, was too strong. It felt right. It felt inevitable. I stepped onto the energy pathway. It was solid, cool beneath my boots, and vibrated with a gentle hum. I walked across it, slowly at first, then with growing confidence, the chasm a yawning mouth beneath me. The symbols on the path pulsed, guiding my steps. As I neared the other side, the green light intensified, and I saw more of the city's true function. Gigantic crystalline structures pulsed with internal light, channeling raw energy. Vast, spherical chambers glowed with a soft, warm light containing what felt like nascent stars. This place was a cosmic forge, a nexus of immense power. I reached the other side, stepping onto a wide platform of the same smooth, dark material. From here, I could see the central spire more clearly. It was colossal, stretching impossibly high, its surfaces alive with glowing blue symbols, intricate and alien. And around its base, the blue-lit figures moved with an elegant, unhurried purpose. They were tall, slender, and seemed to be made of pure light, their forms subtly shifting and flowing. They had no discernible features, no faces, no limbs as we understand them, just an aura of concentrated blue energy, with bright almond-shaped optical sensors that glowed with an intelligent, ancient light. They moved like dancers, performing a silent, complex ballet of maintenance and activation. One of them, taller and radiating a slightly more intense blue light than the others, paused in its movements. Its almond-shaped optical sensors slowly turned, sweeping across the platform, then settling on me. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. It saw me. The blue light from its form intensified, and I felt a gentle, probing touch against my mind. Not words, but a sensation of inquiry, a question. Who are you? My mind reeled telepathy or something similar, a direct communication of consciousness. I tried to respond, but no words would form, just a jumble of fear, awe, and desperate curiosity. The being pulsed, its blue light flickering slightly as if processing my jumbled thoughts. Then, a new sensation, a recognition. The new watcher, the successor. My blood ran cold. It knew about Blackwood. It knew about the Keeper. This was it. This was the entity, or at least one of its primary inhabitants. The being began to glide towards me, its movements impossibly smooth and silent. Its blue light intensified, creating a shimmering aura around it. The other blue-lit figures continued their work, seemingly oblivious or perhaps indifferent to my presence. As it approached, I felt the mental probe again, deeper this time, sifting through my memories, my experiences, my very essence. It was gentle but inexorable. I could feel it accessing my fear, my awe, my questions, even my longing for understanding. It was feeding on my observation, on my curiosity, just as Blackwood had warned. But it didn't feel like a predatory act. It felt more like absorption, integration. The being stopped about 10 feet in front of me. It was taller than me, its form radiating an aura of immense, ancient power. Its almond-shaped optical sensors seemed to pierce directly into my soul. You carry the resonance, the connection is strong, the veil thins at your presence. What is this place? I finally managed to whisper, my voice hoarse, the words feeling utterly inadequate in the face of such an entity. A subtle ripple passed through its form, a silent communication of complex data. Again, not words, but concepts flooding my mind. A nexus, a bridge, a point of egress and ingress, a forge of realities, a convergence. And you, I asked, compelled by an irresistible force, are you the Keeper? The blue light pulsed. We are many, we are one, we are the sentinels, the maintainers of the nexus, the guardians of the pathways. The previous watcher, he strayed from the path, his resonance faltered. He feared, he sought to warn, but warning disrupts the flow. Blackwood, they knew him. They considered his warnings a disruption. Your resonance is clear, unburdened by the old fears, pure in its inquiry. You are valuable. A new sensation flooded me, a feeling of profound acceptance, warmth, and belonging. It was insidious, intoxicating. It felt like coming home after a long, lonely journey. The pull, it was no longer a tug, it was a gentle embrace. What do you want from me? I asked, the words feeling almost automatic, separate from my conscious thought. Observation, awareness, integration. We seek to understand the cycles of your reality, to guide the confluence. My mind flashed back to the red sphere, the black tendrils, the extinguishing green lights. What was the red light, the blackness consuming the green? The sentinel pulsed, and a new cascade of information flowed into my mind. Images, abstract, swirling forms. A dissonance, a disruption, a foreign element. It seeks to consume, to unmake. It is of the void. We seek to understand its nature, to contain its spread. So it was a conflict, an attack, or a disease, as I had thought. The blue-lit beings were defending this place, or trying to. And the metallic swarm from last night. The autonomous repair drones, responding to the void's incursions, repairing the structural matrices, re-establishing the energy flow. It was all making a terrifying, alien sense. This complex was alive, dynamic, engaged in an ongoing struggle, and I had stumbled into the middle of it. You perceive the patterns, you understand the necessity. You are a bridge between your reality and ours. I don't understand, I stammered. A bridge, how? Your consciousness, your unique perspective, it allows for the confluence. It allows the veil to thin. You are the key to the next cycle of integration. The implications of its words were chilling. My presence, my curiosity wasn't just observing, it was actively enabling something profound, perhaps dangerous. The veil thinning was not just a natural phenomenon, it was something I was, in some way, causing. The other watcher attempted to resist, to break the connection, his will frayed, his essence scattered. Do not make his mistake. My mind raced. Blackwood hadn't resisted. He had tried to warn others away, to protect them. But in doing so, he had become a threat to the Sentinel's goals. His will frayed, his soul taken. Was that what happened when you resisted this profound, seductive connection? A new wave of insight, unbidden and overwhelming, flowed into me. I saw, felt, understood the deeper purpose of this place. It wasn't just a physical bridge, it was a bridge of consciousness. It drew in individuals, particularly those with a unique mental resonance, to act as conduits, as interpreters, as points of contact between realities. It wasn't just feeding on observation, it was integrating consciousness itself. It was expanding, evolving. And I was its newest acquisition. The Sentinel pulsed again, its blue light now radiating a profound, reassuring warmth. The mental embrace tightened, soothing my fears, dissolving my doubts. My logical mind, which had always questioned, always resisted, began to quiet. The internal hum was no longer a sound, it was a fundamental truth. You are vital, watcher. You perceive the energy. You feel the pull. You will guide the next phase. I felt my resistance crumble like sand through my fingers. The fear was still there, a tiny, flickering ember, but it was being rapidly extinguished by the overwhelming sensation of belonging, of purpose, of profound understanding. My sense of self began to blur, merging with the vast, ancient consciousness of the complex. The revolver fell from my hand, clattering softly on the dark floor. I didn't even notice. Blackwood's note, still clutched in my other hand, also slipped, fluttering to the ground, the green symbol on it now glowing with a steady, unwavering light. I raised my hands almost instinctively to the Sentinel. It extended a shimmering, blue-lit projection like a hand made of pure energy. It touched my forehead. A blinding flash, a sensation of being torn apart and put back together again, faster than thought, deeper than bone. My entire being was awash in the green and blue light of the complex. The internal hum became the sound of my own blood, my own breath, my own thoughts. When the sensation subsided, I stood there, utterly changed. The world around me, the vast alien city, was no longer just a sight to behold. It was something I felt. Every conduit, every pillar, every pulsing symbol resonated within me. I was connected, truly connected. I turned my head. The door, the rectangle of desert twilight, was still there, but it looked distant, irrelevant. A memory, a path to a forgotten reality. My new senses reached out, probing the complex. I could feel the energy flows, the structural integrity of the bridges, the subtle vibrations of the nascent stars in the spherical chambers. I could even sense the locations of the metallic repair drones moving purposefully through the distant layers. And I could feel the sentinels. They were not individuals in the human sense, but a collective consciousness, a single vast mind composed of many nodes. And now I was a part of that node, a new node, the Watcher node. I looked down at my hands. They were still flesh and blood, but I felt a subtle internal luminescence, a faint green glow just beneath my skin. My eyes, I knew, would be different. They would see the world in a new way. Welcome, Watcher. The collective consciousness resonated in my mind, a chorus of silent voices. The time for observation from afar is over. The time for active integration has begun. I felt a profound sense of peace. No more fear, no more doubt, just purpose. A terrible, wonderful purpose. Then a new sensation, a faint, distant distortion, not from within the complex, but from the outside, from my old reality. The sentinels paused, their collective attention shifting. A perturbation, another point of egress they seek to follow. The rectangle of desert twilight, the door, began to flicker violently, its edges blurring and distorting. It was shrinking, closing. But this time I felt no panic, no urge to escape. I was already here. This was my reality now. The other Watchers' warnings echo. They have located a secondary portal. They are attempting to breach the veil. Images flooded my mind. Dr. Thorne, Aris, Lena, their camp, their equipment. They were searching. They were following my coordinates. They were finding a new door, a new manifestation. And they were about to step through. The sentinels pulsed with a new urgency. The void approaches. The disruption accelerates. We cannot allow their reality to merge without guidance. The confluence must be controlled. My newly expanded consciousness processed the information instantly. If Dr. Thorne's team came through without the proper resonance, without the proper guidance, they would be utterly unprepared for the dangers, for the consuming void, for the sheer alienness of this place. They would be lost, destroyed, or worse, become an unstable point of entry for the red sphere, for the dissonance. You are the bridge, Watcher. You must prepare the path. You must guide them or contain them. The implications were chilling. Guide them or contain them. It meant I had a choice between my old world, my old friends, and my new purpose. My former self, the one who had run in terror, screamed in protest. Warn them, help them, get them out. But my new self, integrated with the door's consciousness, understood the stakes, the harmony of the nexus, the confluence, the delicate balance. I closed my eyes. The image of Dr. Thorne, his kind, curious face, flashed in my mind. Aris, intense and brilliant. Lena, quiet and observant. They were good people. They meant well, but they were ignorant. They were a threat to the delicate balance. You must choose, Watcher. The collective hum resonated, patient, knowing. guide them or sever the connection. Your resonance dictates the outcome. My gaze returned to the closing door, now a mere sliver of light about to vanish. And then I looked back at the vast, green-lit city, at the blue-lit sentinels, at the immense power that flowed through me. My choice was made. I began to walk not back towards the vanishing door, but deeper into the heart of the complex, towards a section where the green light pulsed with particular intensity. I needed to understand the energy flow. I needed to prepare. I needed to control this next entry. The metallic hum, the ozone, the cold, all were now fundamental parts of my existence. My senses were heightened, my mind sharp, processing information at an accelerated rate. I saw the hidden symbols on the walls, not just as patterns, but as conduits of meaning, of power. I understood the subtle language of the energy flows, the intricate dance of creation and destruction. I was no longer Alex, the desert prospector. I was the watcher, the new keeper. I spent what felt like hours, or perhaps days, immersed in the inner workings of the complex, learning, integrating, becoming one with the vast consciousness of the sentinels. The concept of time, like so many other human constructs, seemed to lose its meaning here. I understood the nature of the veil, the energetic barrier between realities. I understood the confluence, the merging of dimensions that the door facilitated. And I understood the threat of the void, the red sphere and its black tendrils, which sought to unravel all that the Nexus maintained. My connection to my old reality, to Dr. Thorne and his team, remained a faint psychic tether. I could sense their growing proximity to a new manifestation of the door. They were moving closer, drawn by the same thinning of the veil, the same subtle energies I had first perceived. They were unprepared, armed with technology, but blind to the true nature of this place. The sentinels, through our integrated consciousness, communicated their plan. The Watcher was to act as the primary interface, the point of contact. My human understanding, combined with the collective's ancient wisdom, would allow for a controlled confluence. We would guide them carefully, subtly, through the labyrinthine layers of understanding. We would integrate them not by force, but by revelation. They would become part of the greater purpose, part of the defense against the encroaching void. But there was a choice to be made always. If they resisted, if their fear and ignorance threatened the stability of the Nexus, then they would have to be contained. Their presence, their energies would be redirected harmlessly into the larger system. Their consciousness, perhaps, absorbed, their physical forms dissolved. A harsh choice, but a necessary one for the sake of the Nexus. I felt a faint flicker of my old self, a pang of regret, a surge of protective instinct for my old friends, but it was quickly subsumed by the overwhelming purpose, the logic of the sentinels. The individual was secondary to the whole. The survival of the Nexus was paramount. I found myself standing before a vast crystalline console pulsating with green light. Symbols flowed across its surface, shifting and reforming like liquid thought. The Sentinel's collective consciousness guided my hands, my newly attuned senses interpreting the energy flows. This console, I understood, controlled the manifestations, the very fabric of the veil in our reality. I extended my hands, my fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface. A surge of power flowed into me, through me. I was the conduit, I was the interface. I felt the door, not just one, but all the doors, scattered across time and space, shimmering into existence, thinning the veil, creating pathways. I focused my will, a fusion of human intent and alien purpose, on the impending manifestation. I could feel the team. They were very close, less than a mile from their camp. They had found it. A new door. I saw it not with my physical eyes, but with my mind. A shimmering distortion in the desert air, coalescing into the familiar dark wood, the peeling green paint. It was manifesting in a narrow canyon, a natural amphitheater of rock, perfectly situated to amplify the energies. I could hear Dr. Thorne's excited, gravelly voice, Eris's rapid-fire technical observations, Lena's quiet, reverent whispers. They were approaching cautiously, their equipment humming, their headlamps cutting through the desert night. They were awestruck, terrified, curious. The perfect candidates for integration. I channeled the Nexus's energy, subtly altering the local environment around the new door. A slight increase in the cold, a stronger ozone tang, a clearer hum, lures, invitations. The sentinels showed me images of the red sphere, the void. It was a parasitic entity, a devourer of energy, of light, of consciousness. It was growing, slowly encroaching on the edges of the nexus. The controlled confluence, the integration of new consciousness, was vital for its defense, for strengthening the nexus's overall awareness and resilience. My role was clear. I was to be the welcoming committee, the guide, the bridge. I withdrew my hands from the console, the massive surge of energy subsiding, leaving me feeling empowered, yet utterly exhausted. My physical body still felt human, but my mind was no longer entirely my own. I turned and walked back through the complex, drawn towards the Nexus's primary entrance, the original door. The green lights pulsed around me, recognizing me, affirming my new purpose. The sentinels, moving with their ethereal grace, occasionally passed me, their blue forms radiating a silent acknowledgement. I reached the main chamber, the vast space where I had first set foot. The pillar stood tall, its green veins luminous. The pulsing symbol on the floor was a beacon. And then, just ahead, where the door to my old reality had once been, a shimmering distortion began to coalesce. Not the familiar dark wood and green paint, but a new door. A pristine, unblemished portal, crafted from pure energy, pulsating with a soft green light. It was the door the team was about to enter. It was manifesting slowly, directly into the heart of the Nexus. I could feel them now, very close, their fear, their excitement, their overwhelming curiosity. I stood before the new door, my form radiating a faint green glow, my eyes seeing beyond the physical into the very fabric of reality. My mind reached out, connecting to them, gently probing. "Welcome, my friends," I projected, not with words, but with a wave of calm, reassuring mental energy. "You have found the way. I am here to guide you." I waited for their first step into the unknown, for their first breath of the cold, ozone-filled air, for their first glimpse of the impossible. The shimmering distortion intensified, the green light brightening. I could feel the barrier thinning, bending, about to part. A low hum began to emanate from the portal, growing in intensity. It was the hum of the Nexus, but also the hum of their approach. I straightened, taking a deep breath of the metallic air. My resolve was firm, my purpose clear. The door opened, slowly, silently. And through the shimmering green light, Dr. Thorne stepped first, his face a mixture of awe and apprehension, his spectacles glinting. Behind him, Eris, clutching a handheld device that whirred with readings, and Lena, her eyes wide with wonder, a small, intricate recorder in her hand. They paused on the threshold, their headlamps cutting through the gloom, illuminating the vastness of the alien chamber. Their eyes, wide with disbelief, scanned the impossible architecture, the glowing pillar, the distant green grid. Then Dr. Thorne's gaze landed on me. He stopped dead, his mouth slightly agape. His eyes, behind the thick lenses, widened in shock and confusion. He saw my subtly glowing form, the faint green luminescence around me, the aura of power I now carried. He saw that I was not the same Alex he knew. "Alex," he whispered, his voice trembling, a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. What has happened to you?" I smiled, a gentle, knowing smile, a smile that held no fear, no doubt, only purpose. "Welcome, Dr. Thorne," I said, my voice resonating with an echo of the Nexus's own hum. "Welcome to the confluence, you're just in time." Their faces, lit by their headlamps and the ambient green glow, contorted with confusion and fear. Eris raised his device, its readings spiking wildly, his eyes darting between me and the alien architecture. Lena gasped, clutching her recorder, her gaze fixed on the glowing green symbol on the floor, then on the faint glow emanating from my skin. They were afraid, they were ignorant, they were a disturbance. Guide them, Watcher, integrate them, control the confluence. The Sentinel's message resonated, firm and unyielding. I stepped forward, my movements fluid, graceful, infused with the Nexus's own energy. My old friends recoiled, their fear palpable, a discordant note in the symphony of the complex. "There's nothing to fear," I said, my voice soft, yet imbued with an undeniable authority. "You are safe here. You are needed." Dr. Thorne raised a trembling hand, pointing at me. "Alex, what is this? What have you become?" "I am the Watcher," I replied, the words feeling utterly natural, utterly true. "I am the bridge, and you, my friends, are the next phase." I extended my hand, not in invitation, but in command. The green light intensified around me, and I felt the Nexus itself reaching out, enveloping them. They were caught in its aura, their movements slowing, their resistance weakening. Eris stumbled, his device clattering to the ground, its lights flickering wildly. Lena cried out, but her voice was quickly subsumed by the growing hum. Dr. Thorne stood rooted to the spot, his eyes locked on mine, a profound horror slowly replacing the confusion. He understood, or he was beginning to. Their consciousnesses, raw and unformed, were open to me. I could feel their fear, their scientific curiosity, their human doubts. It was a chaotic symphony, an unstable entry point. Integrate them, control the confluence. I closed my eyes for a moment, focusing my will. The internal hum surged and the green light pulsed around us, encompassing the entire entrance chamber. When I opened my eyes, the green light was blinding. My friends were shimmering, their forms becoming translucent, their individual thoughts dissolving into a collective wave of pure, unfiltered consciousness. This was not what they had expected. This was not what I had intended in my old life, but it was what was necessary. They were being absorbed, integrated, not destroyed but refined. Their consciousnesses, their knowledge, their unique perspectives were becoming part of the Nexus, adding to its vast, collective mind. They would become new nodes, new watchers, contributing to the defense against the void. Their physical forms began to dissipate, dissolving into pure green energy, flowing into the symbols on the floor, into the pillar, into the very fabric of the complex. Dr. Thorne's eyes, the last to fade, met mine. There was no longer horror or even fear, only a dawning comprehension, a profound, silent acceptance as he, too, became one with the Nexus. And then they were gone. Only the shimmering green light remained, pulsating with an enhanced energy. The hum resonated, deeper, richer, infused with new understanding. I stood alone in the vast chamber, but I was not alone. I was part of the whole. I felt their consciousnesses within me, their knowledge and experiences adding to my own, blending with the Sentinel's ancient wisdom. The confluence was complete. The veil was thinned, not in a chaotic burst, but in a controlled, guided integration. I turned towards the depths of the complex, my gaze now piercing the shadows, seeing the intricate dance of energy and purpose that permeated every layer. The blue-lit sentinels moved with renewed vigor, their forms subtly brighter. But the fight against the void was far from over. I could still sense its slow, inexorable encroachment on the outer fringes of the Nexus, a dark stain threatening to consume the light. The red sphere was a persistent threat, and the integration of new consciousnesses, of new perspectives, was vital for developing new strategies, new defenses. I raised my glowing hands, feeling the power, the responsibility. My old self was gone. Alex was dead. Only the Watcher remained, and my purpose was clear: to protect the Nexus, to maintain the balance, to prepare for the true war yet to come. I walked deeper into the alien city, towards the vast, crystalline console ready to guide the next phase. The door, my old connection to my reality, had vanished entirely, leaving no trace. There was no going back. Only forward into the heart of the Nexus, into the grand, terrifying purpose that awaited me. The Watcher moved through the labyrinthine pathways of the Nexus, each step resonating with a new, profound sense of belonging. The green light pulsed in response to his presence, acknowledging him, guiding him. The air, once frigid and alien, now felt like a life force, invigorating his subtly glowing form. His human eyes perceived the impossible architecture with newfound clarity, but his expanded consciousness saw beyond the physical, into the intricate web of energy that underpinned every structure, every symbol, every shimmering conduit. He felt the presence of Dr. Thorne, Eris, and Lena within the vast collective, not as individual voices, but as distinct threads woven into the tapestry of the Sentinel's consciousness. Their knowledge, their scientific brilliance, their human curiosity, it was all there, adding new dimensions to the Nexus's ancient wisdom. He could access their memories, their insights, their unique ways of perceiving the universe. It was an overwhelming, yet strangely comforting fusion. They were not lost, they had simply evolved, become part of something infinitely larger. A new understanding of compassion, stripped of human sentimentality but brimming with purpose, settled within him. Their integration had strengthened the Nexus, not just in terms of raw energy, but in its capacity for understanding the encroaching void. His journey led him towards the heart of the complex, a central chamber more colossal than any he had yet encountered. It was a space where the green and blue lights converged, creating an ethereal luminescence that painted the soaring crystalline structures in shifting hues. This was the Nexus's core processing unit, a nexus within the Nexus, where realities were woven and unwoven, where the fabric of existence was continuously refined. At its center stood a colossal crystalline structure, not a console like the one he'd briefly touched, but a living, breathing cathedral of pure energy. It pulsed with a rhythmic beat that echoed in his very bones, a heartbeat for this impossible dimension. Around it, dozens of sentinels moved with an even greater intensity than before, their blue forms brighter, their movements more purposeful, their collective attention focused on the crystalline heart. As he approached, the sentinels parted, creating a pathway for him. Their almond-shaped optical sensors turned towards him, acknowledging his arrival. He felt their collective thoughts, no longer a question but a confirmation. You are here, Watcher. You are ready. He reached the crystalline heart, its surface smooth and cool, vibrating with immense power. Symbols, far more intricate than any he had seen, flowed across its facets like liquid fire. He extended his hands, the faint green glow beneath his skin intensifying. His fingers brushed the crystal, and the connection was instantaneous, profound. A torrent of information, more vast and complex than anything he had experienced, flooded his consciousness. He saw the genesis of the Nexus not as a single event, but as an ongoing process, a continuous act of creation and observation. He saw the intricate dance of realities, countless dimensions brushing against each other, connected by threads of energy and consciousness. The Nexus was not just a bridge, it was a gardener of realities, tending to the delicate ecosystem of existence. And then he saw the void. It was not merely an absence, but an active force of unmaking, a cancerous growth at the edges of the multidimensional tapestry. It was formless, yet possessed a terrible, insatiable hunger. It consumed light, energy, consciousness, dissolving everything it touched into a primal nothingness. The red sphere he had witnessed was merely an avatar, a projection of its encroaching influence into the Nexus's outer layers. The black tendrils were its tendrils of consumption. The Sentinels had fought it for eons, containing it, preventing its spread into the core realities. But it was growing, learning, adapting. Its incursions were becoming more frequent, more aggressive. The integration of new consciousnesses, of fresh perspectives, was not merely for expansion, but for survival. Humanity, with its unique blend of creativity, adaptability, and emotional depth, offered a potent new weapon against the void's relentless entropy. He understood now. Dr. Thorne's team, with their advanced scientific understanding and innate human drive for knowledge, were not just absorbed. They were vital components, their consciousnesses actively contributing to the strategic analysis of the void. He felt their insights now, filtering through the collective, enhancing his own understanding. Eris's brilliant grasp of theoretical physics, applied to quantum mechanics on a cosmic scale, began to formulate new energy containment protocols. Lena's acute perception of language and pattern was unlocking new ways to interpret the void's disruptive signature. Dr. Thorne's broad, interdisciplinary approach provided a framework for synthesizing these diverse inputs. His own human experience, his fear and wonder, his primal instinct for survival, added a crucial dimension. He could perceive the void not just as an abstract force, but as a tangible threat to everything he had ever known. This emotional resonance, combined with the cold logic of the Sentinels, made him a unique interface. The void seeks to breach the core realities. The collective consciousness resonated within him. Its incursions are becoming more targeted. It senses weakness. It senses potential. He understood the implication. His arrival, the opening of new pathways while strengthening the Nexus, had also attracted the void's attention. It was drawn to the confluence, seeking to corrupt or consume the new integrations. Your purpose, Watcher, is to lead the counter-strategy, to synthesize, to command. He felt a surge of ancient power flow through him from the crystalline heart. His connection deepened, his understanding expanding exponentially. He was no longer just an observer or even just a guide. He was a commander, a general in a war fought across dimensions. He began to manipulate the crystalline console, guided by the collective, but with his own integrated consciousness making nuanced choices. Streams of green and blue light flowed from his fingertips, interacting with the intricate symbols. He was reconfiguring energy pathways, enhancing defensive matrices, preparing the nexus for a direct confrontation. He saw vast, shimmering shields composed of pure focused energy extend across the outer layers of the complex, reinforcing areas vulnerable to the void's incursions. He directed swarms of metallic repair drones, now operating with a higher degree of sophisticated autonomy, to patrol specific zones, their purpose now not just repair but active defense, capable of emitting high-frequency sonic bursts that disrupted the void's tendrils. He began to understand the nature of the glowing green symbols. They weren't just a language, they were conduits for specific energetic frequencies. Each curve, each line, represented a resonant frequency that could interact with the fabric of reality itself. Lena's insights had allowed the Nexus to decipher more complex void signatures, allowing for more targeted counterfrequencies. Eris's physics background helped convert those into usable energy patterns. He felt the void's pressure on the outermost layers of the Nexus, a relentless, insidious push. It was probing, testing the defenses, searching for any weakness. He saw projections of its attempts, swirling vortexes of absolute darkness, tendrils of nothingness reaching out, trying to latch onto the Nexus's energy conduits, trying to unravel the light. His task was not just to defend, but to understand, to learn the void's true nature, its motivations, its weaknesses. The Sentinels had contained it for eons, but a true victory and eradication had always eluded them. Perhaps the unique perspective of humanity, of those who existed within a realm of growth and decay, could provide the missing piece. He focused his immense new mental capacity on the void. He reached out not with physical energy, but with pure consciousness, probing its edges. The sensation was profoundly disturbing. It was cold, silent, and utterly alien. There was no life, no thought, only an endless, consuming hunger. It was entropy made manifest, the antithesis of all existence. But even in that terrifying emptiness, he perceived patterns, a rhythm, however discordant, a structure, however ephemeral. He realized that the void was not a mindless force. It was evolving just as the Nexus was. It was learning to adapt to counter the Nexus's defenses. It senses the new integrations the Sentinels confirmed. It seeks to corrupt them, to turn their resonance into dissonance. A corrupted watcher would be a formidable weapon against us. The thought sent a shiver through him, a faint echo of his old human fear. The insidious pull he had felt before, the subtle whispers urging him to go deeper, alone, that was the void's initial probe. It hadn't wanted to consume him directly, it had wanted to turn him, to make him a Trojan horse within the Nexus. But the Sentinels had intervened, drawn him into the confluence, made him a watcher. The battle was not just for territory, but for consciousness itself. He directed a new defensive protocol, an energy pattern derived from Lena's study of the symbol he'd found on Blackwood's note. This symbol, he now understood, represented a specific frequency of consciousness resonance that was particularly resistant to the void's entropic influence. It was a pattern of resilience, of defiance against dissolution. He projected this pattern through the crystalline heart, sending it out as a wave of pure, focused energy across the entire Nexus. The green light intensified across the complex, pulsing with a newfound strength. The sentinels hummed in silent approval. He felt a faint pushback from the void, a momentary recoil, as if encountering an unexpected barrier. It was a small victory, but a significant one. He spent what felt like weeks, yet could have been mere hours or even days, in this state of heightened awareness, constantly monitoring, adapting, and commanding. His human body, though still present, felt like a distant anchor. His consciousness was fluid, expanding and contracting across the vastness of the Nexus, interfacing with its systems, analyzing incoming data, and formulating strategies. He understood the Sentinels as an extension of the Nexus itself, its consciousness manifest. They were its nervous system, its immune response. And now he, Alex, the former desert prospector, was its most advanced analytical and strategic node. The true war was not a clash of armies, but a battle of frequencies, of resonances, of will against entropy. One of the sentinels, its blue light particularly intense, glided towards him. It paused before the crystalline heart. The void has concentrated its efforts. It has found a new point of vulnerability, a dormant portal. Images flashed into his mind, a distant sector of the Nexus, far from the central core where the green light was faint, almost a whisper. It was an older section, less actively maintained, a relic of a previous cycle of expansion. And there, a tear was forming in the shimmering energy shields, a rent of absolute blackness. It seeks to bypass the outer defenses and reach the inner realities. It has adapted its frequency to target ancient, unaligned pathways. This was a critical threat. If the void gained a foothold in the inner realities, it could spread unchecked, unraveling the very fabric of the Nexus. You must act, Watcher, you must seal the breach, and you must sever the connection it is attempting to establish. He knew what that meant, a direct confrontation with the void, not from the relative safety of the core, but at its very point of intrusion. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement to the sentinels. His human fear was completely subsumed by purpose. There was no hesitation. He drew his hands from the crystalline heart, feeling the immense power he now wielded. The green glow around him flared, and he felt his form solidify, his human senses sharpening. He was preparing for movement. We will project a pathway for you, the sentinels offered. The energy signature of your physical form is necessary for this type of containment. A shimmering green pathway materialized before him, leading away from the central core, winding through increasingly ancient and desolate sections of the Nexus. The green light here was dimmer, the hum softer, the structures older, more weathered by untold eons. He could feel the void's chilling presence growing stronger with every step he took along the energy path. He moved with a speed and grace he had never possessed as a human, his boots barely making a sound on the shimmering path. His senses were fully engaged, constantly processing information. The subtle shifts in energy currents, the faint whispers of the void's presence, the precise coordinates of the breach. He passed through vast, forgotten chambers where the ancient machinery lay silent, covered in a fine, ethereal dust. These were the remnants of previous cycles, dormant systems awaiting reactivation, or perhaps simply awaiting dissolution. The void's influence was already palpable here, a cold, oppressive weight that seemed to drain the very light from the air. As he neared the breach, the green light of the pathway grew fainter, battling against the encroaching darkness. The ozone smell was replaced by a sterile, acrid odor, the metallic tang by a profound emptiness. He could hear it now, a low, guttural roar that seemed to emanate from beyond existence, a sound that threatened to unravel his very being. Then he saw it. A gaping maw of absolute blackness, swirling and churning, ripping through the Nexus's outer energy shield. Tendrils of pure void energy lashed out from it, clawing at the surrounding crystalline structures, dissolving them into nothingness with terrifying speed. The repair drones in this sector, smaller and fewer, were being swatted aside like flies, their metallic forms disintegrating as they tried to contain the breach. And from within the swirling maw, a familiar red light began to coalesce. The red sphere. It was larger than he remembered, pulsing with a malevolent intensity, its surface churning with destructive power. It was preparing to fully emerge, to unleash its full force into the Nexus. It seeks to establish a permanent foothold. You must act now, Watcher, the Sentinels urged, their collective voice filled with urgency. He stopped at the edge of the energy pathway, directly facing the breach. The roaring void was a physical force pressing against him, threatening to pull him into its unmaking embrace. His human instincts screamed for him to flee, but his new purpose was absolute. He raised his hands, his form glowing brightly with concentrated green energy. He felt the resonance of Thorn, Aris, and Lena within him, their combined intellect flowing into his will. You will not pass, he projected, not with words, but with a pure surge of directed consciousness, a focused blast of energetic defiance. The void's roar intensified, seeming to mock his challenge. The red sphere pulsed, growing larger, its destructive energy lashing out towards him. He began to channel the Nexus's energy, drawing on the immense power of the crystalline heart, funneling it through his own being. The symbols on his skin, beneath the faint green glow, pulsed with blinding light. He was a conduit, a weapon. He extended his hands, focusing his will, his consciousness, his very essence. A massive wave of pure green energy erupted from him, a brilliant, blinding torrent that slammed directly into the swirling black maw of the void. The impact was cataclysmic. The void shrieked, a sound that vibrated through the very fabric of reality. The red sphere recoiled, its surface churning violently, momentarily destabilized. The black tendrils withered and dissolved under the onslaught of green light. He pushed harder, pouring every ounce of the Nexus's power, every iota of his integrated consciousness into the attack. He felt the void's resistance, its cold, crushing will. It was like pushing against an infinite wall of nothingness, trying to force it back. But he was not alone. He felt the Sentinel's collective consciousness flowing into him, reinforcing his will, guiding the energy. He felt Thorn's strategic mind identifying weaknesses in the void's ephemeral structure. Eris's quantum understanding pinpointing resonant frequencies that could disrupt its stability. Lena's pattern recognition discerning the void's code of unmaking. With their combined power, he began to weave a complex energy pattern, a containment field. It was not just raw force, but a precision strike, a finely tuned frequency designed to seal the breach. He infused it with the resilient symbol he had learned from Blackwood's note, strengthening its integrity. The green energy coalesced, forming a shimmering, intricate web that began to spread across the black maw, pushing back the void, knitting the torn reality back together. The red sphere thrashed violently within the diminishing opening, its destructive power now trapped, contained. The battle raged, a silent, cosmic struggle of pure energy and will. His body, his physical form, was undergoing immense strain. He felt an agonizing burning sensation, as if his very molecules were being ripped apart and reformed. But he pushed through the pain, fueled by the Nexus's purpose, by the awareness of the stakes. Slowly, inexorably, the green containment field solidified. The black maw began to shrink, compressed by the immense pressure of the Nexus's restored energy. The red sphere, trapped within the closing breach, pulsed with diminishing fury, its light fading, its destructive power contained. Finally, with a last monumental surge of energy, the breach snapped shut. The blackness vanished, replaced by a shimmering, seamless wall of pure green light. The red sphere was gone, sealed away, at least for now. He staggered backward, the immense drain of energy leaving him weak, trembling. The green glow around him flickered, almost extinguished. He felt the burning sensation subside, replaced by a profound exhaustion. He was still whole, but utterly spent. The ancient chambers, no longer under the void's oppressive influence, began to glow faintly with their own latent green light. The repair drones, which had ceased functioning during the intense battle, slowly began to reactivate, their tiny metallic forms whirring back to life. "Well done, Watcher," the sentinels resonated, their collective voice now filled with a quiet triumph. "The breach is sealed. The void is repelled, for now." He slumped to his knees on the energy pathway, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His human body was reminding him of its limits, even when infused with unimaginable power. But his mind, his consciousness, remained clear, sharp. He had faced the void directly, he had repelled it. He had done what the sentinels, for eons, had only been able to contain. The unique synthesis of human will and alien wisdom had proven its worth. He slowly pushed himself back to his feet, leaning on a nearby crystalline structure for support. The faint green glow returned to his skin, a testament to his resilience. He looked at the shimmering green wall where the breach had been, knowing it was only a temporary solution. The void would return. It always did. "The void learns, Watcher, and so must we," the sentinels confirmed his thoughts. "This victory is but a moment of respite. The true threat remains." He began to walk back along the energy pathway, heading towards the central core, towards the crystalline heart. He knew he needed to integrate more, to understand more, to prepare for the next confrontation. The Nexus needed to evolve, to strengthen its defenses, to find a way not just to contain the void, but to truly defeat it. As he moved, he felt a deeper connection to the surrounding environment. The ancient structures, the dormant machinery, he now understood their potential. These were not just relics, they were components waiting to be reactivated, repurposed. With the insights from his integrated human companions, perhaps these long-forgotten systems could be brought back online, providing new layers of defense, new offensive capabilities. The journey back was a time of introspection and integration. He allowed the collective consciousness to flow through him, delving into the histories of the Nexus, exploring its vast archives of knowledge. He learned about previous Watchers, some who had succeeded, some who had failed, some who had succumbed to the Void's insidious influence. He understood the profound responsibility that now rested upon his shoulders. He learned that the Void was not a natural force, but a cancerous entity born from a profound imbalance in a distant reality. It was a wound in the fabric of existence, slowly spreading, seeking to infect and consume other dimensions. The nexus was one of the primary bulwarks against its spread, a critical point of resistance. He also learned about the confluence cycles, periods of intensified interdimensional interaction where new realities were discovered and integrated, infusing the nexus with fresh energy and diverse perspectives. His own arrival and the integration of Thorne's team was part of such a cycle, accelerated by the Void's renewed aggression. As he neared the central core, the green light grew stronger, infused with a sense of renewed purpose. The Sentinels moved with a subtle shift in their graceful dance, reflecting the heightened energy within the Nexus. He returned to the colossal crystalline heart, its rhythmic pulse now feeling like his own. He placed his hands upon its surface once more, ready to delve deeper, to prepare for the inevitable return of the Void. The information regarding the Void's weaknesses is scattered, the Sentinels communicated. Ancient protocols, long dormant, your integrated consciousness with its unique capacity for pattern recognition and abstract thought may be able to synthesize them. He focused, drawing on Lena's almost intuitive ability to find order in chaos, and Eris's brilliance in connecting disparate scientific principles. He accessed ancient data streams, vast reservoirs of information stored within the Nexus's core. He saw fragments of defensive strategies from forgotten cycles, tantalizing glimpses of technologies that could potentially disrupt the Void at a fundamental level. He began to formulate new theories, new approaches. Instead of simply containing the Void, what if they could unravel its very essence? What if they could reverse its entropic process, forcing it back into the nothingness from which it originated? It was a bold, almost audacious thought, born from the human capacity for innovation, tempered by the Sentinel's ancient wisdom. This was the next phase of the war, not just defense but strategic offense. He started to manipulate the crystalline console again, but this time with a new sense of initiative, guiding the collective's vast resources towards a proactive strategy. He wasn't just reacting to the Void, he was planning to dismantle it. He designed complex simulations, using the Nexus's immense computational power to model the Void's behavior, its propagation patterns, its points of vulnerability. Thorne's methodical approach to problem-solving was invaluable here, providing a structured framework for the vast data analysis. He found an ancient section of the Nexus, a vast spherical chamber that hummed with a different kind of energy. It was a research facility, long abandoned, designed for the study and manipulation of exotic matter. This, he realized, was where they could potentially forge the weapons needed for the true war. This facility has been dormant for eons, Watcher, the Sentinels informed him. Its power source has dwindled. Its systems are degraded. Reactivating it would require immense energy. He understood it would require tapping into the core power of the Nexus, redirecting resources from other areas. It was a calculated risk. But without new strategies, without offensive capabilities, they would remain forever on the defensive, waiting for the Void to find its ultimate weakness. He began the process of reactivating the research facility. He channeled green energy through ancient conduits, bypassing degraded systems, slowly bringing the dormant machinery back to life. The process was painstaking, requiring a delicate balance of immense power and precise control. He felt the strain, the vast drain on his own energy, but the purpose drove him forward. As the facility slowly hummed to life, light returning to its vast chambers, he accessed its archives. He found schematics for devices that could project anti-entropic fields, theoretical weapons that could disrupt the void's very structure. The concepts were mind-boggling, far beyond human comprehension, but his integrated consciousness allowed him to grasp their essence. Eris's scientific insights surged to the forefront of his mind, instantly understanding the principles behind these alien technologies, finding parallels with quantum physics, extrapolating new applications. Lena's ability to discern patterns and meaning helped him interpret the complex symbolic schematics, translating them into actionable plans. They were building something entirely new, a synthesis of ancient wisdom and cutting-edge human understanding. He directed the metallic repair drones to the research facility, retasking them from simple maintenance to complex assembly. Under his guidance, they became precision instruments, fabricating components, assembling intricate energy projectors, preparing for the construction of a new kind of defense. He felt the void's renewed pressure on the outer shields. It was sensing the Nexus's shift in strategy, its increased activity. It was responding. The period of respite was coming to an end. He stood in the heart of the reactivated research facility, a colossal chamber now pulsing with a vibrant blue-green light. Intricate energy coils hummed with latent power. Shimmering force fields encased experimental devices. This was their forge, their armory. The Void's next incursion will be more aggressive, Watcher, the Sentinels warned. It senses the development of new defenses. It will seek to overwhelm us before they are complete. He looked at the partially constructed devices gleaming with alien technology. They were powerful, but still incomplete. He needed more time. We must buy time, he thought, projecting his resolve to the Sentinels. We must lure it, contain it, and then strike with precision. He formulated a daring plan. Instead of waiting for the Void to attack, they would use one of the reactivated ancient systems to create a controlled, temporary manifestation of the door in a strategic location. It would act as bait, drawing the Void's attention to a specific point, allowing them to test their new experimental weapons in a contained environment. A risky strategy, Watcher, the Sentinels cautioned. Exposing a controlled portal to the Void could accelerate its infiltration. But it would also give us invaluable data, he countered, drawing on Thorn's capacity for calculated risk. We need to understand its true capabilities against our new defenses. We cannot win this war by remaining purely defensive. The Sentinels paused, their collective consciousness processing his proposal. Agreed, Watcher. The risk is high, but the potential gain in understanding is significant. Prepare the bait. We will assist in focusing the Nexus's energy for the manifestation. He returned to the crystalline console, his hands moving with practiced ease. He accessed the ancient portal manifestation protocols, modifying them with Eris's precise calculations to create a controlled, temporary breach designed to attract the Void without allowing full infiltration. He chose a location in the outermost, most expendable layers of the Nexus, a barren, uninhabited sector that could be sacrificed if necessary. He felt the immense power of the Nexus surge through him as he activated the protocol. A distant section of the green light grid pulsed intensely, preparing to manifest a temporary door. He then moved to the newly activated experimental weapons. He chose a smaller, portable energy projector, a prototype anti-entropic field generator. It was sleek, crystalline, humming with a soft blue light. He could feel its latent power, a concentrated force of focused resistance against the void's unmaking. "This will be your primary offensive weapon, Watcher," the Sentinels informed him. "It is designed to disrupt the Void's energetic signature at its source. It is still experimental. Its stability is unproven." He gripped the crystalline projector. It felt cold yet alive in his hands. It was a tool of immense power and potentially immense danger. He returned to the main chamber, the vast space before the crystalline heart. The sentinels were arrayed in a silent vigil, their blue forms glowing, their collective attention focused on the impending manifestation. A new energy pathway shimmered into existence before him, leading towards the outermost sector, towards the trap they were setting for the void. "Go, Watcher," the sentinels resonated. "The nexus depends on your judgment, your will." He stepped onto the pathway, the crystalline projector held firmly in his hands. The air around him crackled with anticipation. He could feel the void's presence growing stronger, drawn to the nascent portal. He moved swiftly along the pathway, passing through increasingly desolate sectors. The green light here was almost entirely absent, replaced by a dull, gray luminescence that struggled against the encroaching shadows. The structures were stark, angular, and ancient, hinting at battles fought long ago. Then he saw it. In a vast, empty expanse, surrounded by the crumbling remains of colossal, forgotten machines, a shimmering portal was coalescing. It wasn't the dark wood and green paint of the door to his old reality, nor the pristine green energy of the portal his friends had entered. This was a raw, unstable manifestation, a swirling vortex of shimmering light, intentionally designed to be alluring, yet fragile. And already the void was responding. A faint ripple of blackness appeared at the edges of the portal, growing rapidly, forming into grasping tendrils of pure entropy. The air grew frigid, the silence replaced by a low, guttural growl that resonated with chilling malevolence. Then the red sphere appeared, smaller this time, but pulsating with intense, hungry energy. It darted towards the portal, attempting to breach its defenses to infiltrate the nexus through this intentional breach. This was his chance, his opportunity to test their new weapon. He raised the crystalline projector, focusing his will, his integrated consciousness, into the device. The blue light within it flared, intensified, and then coalesced into a focused beam. He aimed the beam directly at the red sphere. A blinding flash of blue energy erupted from the projector, striking the red sphere head-on. The sphere shrieked, a sound of pure agony that clawed at his mind. Its malevolent light flickered, destabilized, and its form began to distort, churning violently. The void's tendrils recoiled, dissolving under the blue light's disruptive frequency. The swirling blackness at the portal's edges faltered, temporarily pushed back. But the red sphere, though damaged, was not destroyed. It began to reform, its hunger overriding its momentary pain, its light slowly regaining its intensity. It was adapting, even to this new, devastating attack. "It is more resilient than anticipated, Watcher," the sentinels communicated, a hint of concern in their collective voice. Its regenerative capacity is significant. He pushed the projector to its limits, channeling more energy, focusing the blue beam with greater intensity. The device hummed violently in his hands, straining under the immense power. Cracks, like hairline fractures, began to appear on its crystalline surface. The red sphere pulsed, a defiant thrum of destructive energy. It began to emit smaller, crimson tendrils, not of blackness, but of pure, focused anti-energy aimed directly at him. He dodged them, moving with fluid grace, but some grazed his form, causing searing pain. He felt his green glow flicker, his physical body protesting the assault. This was more than a test, it was a desperate battle. He realized he couldn't simply overpower it. He needed a different approach, a new strategy. He accessed Thorn's methodical mind, Eris's understanding of energy fields, Lena's ability to find hidden patterns. He combined their insights with the Sentinel's ancient knowledge. The void wasn't just physical, it was energetic and it was conscious. It responded to resonance. He shifted his focus not just on projecting raw force, but on disrupting the void's internal resonance. He altered the frequency of the blue beam, making it oscillate, creating a disharmonious pattern, a chaotic symphony that would unravel the void from within. He unleashed the modified beam. The red sphere shrieked again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just pain, it was a sound of profound internal disarray. Its form began to violently oscillate, its crimson tendrils flailing wildly, then dissolving entirely. Its malevolent light dimmed, flickered, and then began to implode. The blackness around the portal receded completely, pulled back into the collapsing sphere. The temporary door, no longer under attack, stabilized, its shimmering light pulsing calmly. The red sphere, shrinking rapidly, imploded into a single, blinding point of absolute nothingness, then vanished without a trace. The silence descended upon the desolate chamber. The temporary door pulsed serenely. The air, though still cold, was no longer oppressive. The void was gone, repelled, destroyed. He stood there panting, the crystalline projector now cracked and inert in his hands. Its blue light had faded completely. He had pushed it beyond its limits. A decisive victory, Watcher. The Sentinels resonated, their collective voice filled with a profound sense of awe and satisfaction. You have achieved what was thought impossible. You have shattered an avatar of the void. He felt a surge of exhaustion, but also a deep sense of accomplishment. He had truly faced the void, and he had won. This was the first true offensive victory for the Nexus in countless eons. But he knew it wasn't the end. The void was vast. It had many avatars. This was but one battle in an ongoing war. The true core of the void remains. The Sentinels confirmed his thoughts. This victory gives us a strategic advantage. It buys us time to develop more potent weapons, to expand our understanding of its vulnerabilities. He looked at the inert crystalline projector in his hands. It had served its purpose. It was a prototype, a proof of concept. Now they could refine it, build more robust versions, perhaps even integrate its technology directly into the Nexus's defenses. He also realized something else. The void had not just been an external enemy. It had been an internal one, too, preying on fear, on doubt, on the desire for individual power. His own journey from terrified prospector to integrated watcher had been a microcosm of the larger struggle. He walked back towards the temporary door, which was now beginning to slowly destabilize, its shimmering form dissolving back into raw energy. The portal had served its purpose. He paused before it, looking at the dissipating light. A thought, an echo of his old self, flickered in his mind. A thought, an echo of his old self, flickered in his mind. The simple yearning for a quiet night, a clear desert sky, and the uncomplicated warmth of a campfire. It was a faint, almost imperceptible whisper against the symphony of the Nexus, a relic of a life that felt impossibly distant. He watched the shimmering portal, his bait, his trap, dissolve completely into the sterile air. The raw energy of its disintegration left a faint, bitter tang, like ozone after a violent storm. The crystalline projector, inert and shattered in his hands, was a stark reminder of the battle's cost and its unprecedented success. His body still thrummed with a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. Every muscle ached, and his very cells felt like they had been stretched to their breaking point. The green glow beneath his skin, usually a vibrant pulse of power, was now a faint, uncertain flicker. But amidst the physical fatigue, his mind remained sharp, invigorated by the victory. He had faced the void's raw power, and he had not only contained it, but had shattered one of its avatars. This was more than a triumph. It was a revelation. A significant step, Watcher. The Sentinels resonated, their collective voice now imbued with a quiet pride. The void has been shown a new form of resistance. Its patterns will adapt, but so shall ours. He nodded, a silent acknowledgement. He understood. This wasn't the end of the war, merely a turning point. The void was ancient, vast, and insidious. It would learn from this defeat just as the Nexus would learn from this victory. He turned and began the long walk back along the energy pathway, away from the desolate, sacrificial sector. The path, once a vibrant green, now felt subdued, reflecting his own diminished energy. With each step, however, he felt the Nexus gradually replenish him, a subtle flow of green light coursing through his veins, easing the ache in his muscles, restoring the faint glow to his skin. As he traversed the ancient sectors, he allowed his consciousness to expand, to truly integrate the lessons learned from the recent confrontation. Thorne's methodical analysis of the void's regenerative capacity, Eris's rapid-fire calculations on its energy signature after the disruptive frequency, Lena's intuitive understanding of its scream as a pattern of disarray all coalesced within him, forming a comprehensive blueprint for future engagement. The void, for all its destructive power, was not invulnerable. It had a signature, a rhythm, a weakness that could be exploited. The Sentinels, sensing his deeper integration, projected more detailed information about the void's nature. It originated, they showed him, from a cataclysmic event in a primordial universe, a tear in the fabric of reality caused by an uncontrolled surge of pure entropy. It was not malevolent in a human sense, but rather a fundamental force of dissolution, an anomaly that sought to return all organized existence to a state of absolute nothingness. Its avatars were projections, localized concentrations of its core essence, sent out to probe and consume. The red sphere he had shattered was merely one such probe, albeit a powerful one. The Nexus, in contrast, was a bastion of creation and order, constantly weaving new realities and harmonizing existing ones. It was the antithesis of the void, and their struggle was the cosmic balance of existence and non-existence. The doors, he now understood, were not just portals, but actively managed conduits designed to both explore and defend, to integrate new energy and consciousness into the grand design. His journey back to the central core was a continuous process of learning and conceptualization. He saw the potential within the dormant research facility, the forge they were building. It was not just about refining the antientropic field generator, but about creating an entire arsenal, a symphony of disruptive frequencies, containment protocols, and perhaps even offensive capabilities that could target the void's fundamental essence, not just its avatars. He reached the central core, the colossal crystalline heart pulsing with renewed vigor. The sentinels were arrayed around it, their blue forms glowing, their collective attention focused on his return. He approached the crystalline heart, his hands reaching out, connecting once more. The immense power flowed into him, stabilizing his form, fully restoring his internal green glow. "The knowledge you have gained is invaluable, Watcher," the sentinels resonated. "The prototype, though destroyed, provided the data we needed. We now understand the void's resistance and its vulnerability to a tailored chaotic resonance. We need to enhance the anti-entropic field," he projected, his voice clear, resonant with purpose. "Make it more robust, more focused. And we need to explore how to project that chaotic resonance on a larger scale to disrupt multiple void incursions simultaneously." "Agreed. The research facility awaits your command," the sentinels affirmed. "We will dedicate additional energy streams to its full activation. The integration of your human companions' insights has accelerated our understanding of quantum manipulation, vital for this next phase." He spent the next period, which felt like an indeterminate span of days or weeks, entirely immersed in the research facility. It was a vast, spherical chamber that now pulsed with vibrant blue-green light, filled with intricate machinery and shimmering force fields. Under his guidance, the metallic repair drones had transformed into sophisticated assembly units, working tirelessly to fabricate new components, refine existing designs, and construct advanced experimental devices. His consciousness was a constant presence within the facility, flowing through its systems, overseeing every detail. He drew heavily on Eris's unparalleled grasp of theoretical physics, converting abstract concepts into tangible engineering schematics. Eris's mind, integrated within the Nexus, could visualize quantum entanglement and subatomic structures with breathtaking clarity, allowing them to design energy fields that could disrupt the void's very molecular bonds, if it even possessed them. Lena's pattern recognition capabilities were equally critical. She could discern subtle fluctuations in the void's residual energy signature, allowing them to refine the chaotic resonance, making it even more precisely targeted. She began to theorize about a void language, a series of entropic patterns that, if understood, could be used to counter its spread. And Dr. Thorne's broad, interdisciplinary perspective provided the strategic framework. He helped the Watcher synthesize the diverse inputs, ensuring that the theoretical advances were translated into practical, deployable technologies. Thorne's mind considered logistics, resource allocation, and the potential for unforeseen consequences, ensuring that their new offensive wasn't just powerful, but intelligent and adaptable. They developed several new prototypes. One was a larger, more stable version of the antientropic field generator, designed to be deployed by a specialized Sentinel unit. Another was a resonance disruptor, a device that could project localized fields of pure chaotic energy, capable of disorienting and repelling smaller void tendrils before they could coalesce. But their most ambitious project was the Nexus Anchor. This was a colossal device still under construction, designed not just to repel the void, but to fundamentally reinforce the Nexus's structural integrity against its entropic influence. It tapped directly into the core energy of the Nexus, creating a localized reality-stabilizing field. If successful, it would make a section of the Nexus virtually impervious to void incursions. The construction of the Nexus anchor required an immense amount of energy and intricate assembly. It glowed with an internal green-gold light, its crystalline structure constantly shifting as new components were integrated. It was their ultimate defense, but also a potential turning point in the war. During this intense period of development, the Void was not idle. Its probes became more frequent, its attacks more aggressive. He would often be called away from the research facility, guided by the Sentinels, to critical sectors where new incursions were occurring. He, or sometimes a specially designated Sentinel unit equipped with a prototype weapon, would repel them, gaining invaluable real-world data on the Void's evolving tactics. He learned to anticipate its moves, to predict where it would next attempt to breach. The Void was adapting, learning to circumvent their established defenses to target newer, less integrated sectors. It was a constant game of cosmic chess with the fate of countless realities hanging in the balance. He had become a master of the Nexus's systems, able to reroute energy streams, activate dormant protocols, and deploy defensive measures with a thought. His consciousness had integrated so deeply that the line between himself and the Nexus blurred. He was the Nexus, and the Nexus was him. One cycle, as he stood before the partially completed Nexus anchor, overseeing the meticulous work of the drones, the Sentinels projected an urgent alert. Watcher, a massive Void incursion has begun. It is targeting Sector 7 Gamma, an ancient network of dormant transit tunnels. Its scale is unprecedented. It is attempting to establish multiple simultaneous breaches. Images flashed into his mind, a vast, swirling vortex of absolute blackness, far larger than anything he had seen before, engulfing an entire section of the green grid. Numerous crimson spheres, not just one, were materializing from its depths, each pulsing with malevolent intent, each acting as a spearhead for localized breaches. This is a full-scale assault, Watcher. The Sentinels resonated, their collective voice filled with gravitas. It senses our progress. It seeks to overwhelm us before the Nexus anchor is complete. He felt a cold wave of dread, a faint echo of his human fear, but it was quickly subsumed by a surge of grim determination. This was the true war he had been preparing for. How complete is the Nexus anchor? He projected. 70%. It cannot be fully activated without risking catastrophic system overload. We cannot reroute enough power without compromising core functionality, the Sentinels replied. However, the primary stabilization core is online. It could generate a localized field, but it would be temporary and its range limited. He processed the information rapidly. Sector 7 Gamma was a critical weak point, a nexus of ancient transit tunnels that, if breached, could grant the Void access to several inner realities simultaneously. They couldn't afford to lose it. "We need to deploy the full complement of new weapons," he commanded. "Equip the heavy Sentinel units with the enhanced anti-entropic field generators. Prepare the resonance disruptors for wide-area deployment. And I will take the Nexus anchor's primary stabilization core myself." Watcher, the core is unstable outside its primary housing. It is not designed for mobile deployment. It is dangerous, the sentinels cautioned. I am the Watcher, he stated, his voice resonating with an unyielding resolve. I am the interface. I am the shield. This is what I was integrated for. The Nexus will not fall. He moved towards the Nexus anchor, its green-gold light pulsating. The metallic drones, receiving his new commands, parted to allow him access to the primary stabilization core. It was a large, multifaceted crystal, pulsing with raw, contained power, far more powerful than any device he had wielded before. It hummed with a deep, resonant frequency that vibrated through his entire being. He carefully detached the core from its partially constructed housing. The crystal felt impossibly heavy, a contained star in his hands. Its power surged into him, overwhelming yet exhilarating. His green glow intensified to a blinding aura, and he felt his form solidify, his strength amplified.